There are nights when the universe feels impossibly far away. The stars appear as tiny points of light scattered across an endless darkness, beautiful yet unreachable, like forgotten memories from a time before humanity learned to name the sky. Most people spend their lives looking upward without ever truly seeing it. They notice the moon when it is full. They recognize a bright planet just after sunset. Occasionally they pause to admire a meteor streaking silently across the heavens before returning to the rhythm of ordinary life. The universe waits patiently above them, unchanged by their hurried footsteps. Tonight will be different. Not because the stars have changed. Not because the universe has suddenly revealed a new secret. But because, for the first time, you have chosen to slow down enough to listen. Far from the noise of crowded cities, beyond highways glowing beneath endless streams of headlights, beyond apartment windows illuminated by televisions and restless thoughts, there stands a solitary launch complex facing the open sea. Its white towers rise quietly against the night. No reporters wait outside its gates. No countdown echoes across loudspeakers. No celebration has been prepared. This voyage was never meant to attract attention. Some journeys are too sacred for applause. A gentle ocean breeze carries the scent of salt through the empty observation deck. Above, the Milky Way stretches across the sky like an ancient river of silver dust. Without the glare of city lights, thousands of stars emerge from the darkness, each one shining with light that began traveling toward Earth long before modern civilization existed. Some photons entering your eyes tonight left their stars hundreds of years ago. Others have wandered across space for thousands of years. A few have crossed unimaginable distances, beginning their journey before the pyramids of Egypt were built. Every glance toward the heavens is also a glance backward through time. The universe has always spoken in ancient light. Very few have learned its language. Soft footsteps approach behind you. They are unhurried, measured, almost synchronized with your breathing. You turn. Standing a respectful distance away is the guide who invited you here. No official uniform identifies the traveler. No insignia reveals an organization. The long dark coat moves gently with the ocean wind, while silver strands of hair reflect the quiet starlight overhead. The guide smiles, not with excitement, but with the calm familiarity of someone returning home after a very long journey. You arrived. The voice is barely louder than the waves. I was beginning to think the Earth might convince you to stay. There is no pressure hidden within those words. Only kindness. Only patience. Only the understanding that every traveler reaches this place in their own time. The guide turns toward the launch platform. There she is. At first, you almost miss it. The spacecraft stands in complete silence beneath the stars. Unlike the towering rockets that once carried astronauts into orbit surrounded by pillars of roaring fire, this vessel possesses an elegance that feels strangely timeless. Its smooth white hull reflects moonlight rather than artificial floodlights. Its curved surface resembles polished ceramic more than industrial metal. No visible weapons. No military markings. No aggressive angles. Only quiet geometry. Along its side, almost hidden beneath layers of protective ceramic coating, one word has been engraved with remarkable simplicity. The Serenity. The name seems less like a title than a promise. The guide notices you reading it. People often assume spacecraft are built to outrun danger. A brief pause follows. But this one was built to leave noise behind. For a long moment neither of you speaks. There is no need. The silence itself becomes part of the conversation. Somewhere beyond the shoreline, Waves continue their endless dialogue with the sand. Above, Earth's atmosphere slowly scatters blue wavelengths of sunlight that disappeared hours ago, allowing the deeper colors of the cosmos to emerge. The night sky is not black. It never truly has been. It is filled with subtle shades of indigo, violet, charcoal, and deep sapphire that human eyes only recognize after several minutes of darkness. Your pupils widen. More stars appear. Then more. Soon the empty spaces between constellations begin filling with faint lights that were invisible only moments earlier. The guide nods. Your eyes are remembering. Not adjusting. Remembering. Humans evolved beneath skies like this. For hundreds of thousands of years our ancestors slept beneath rivers of stars without electric lights erasing half the universe above them. The modern world did not create darkness. It merely taught us to forget how luminous darkness could be. The guide begins walking toward the spacecraft. You follow. Each footstep across the polished concrete seems quieter than the last. Perhaps the sounds have not changed. Perhaps your attention has. Near the base of the launch platform, the guide stops beside a low stone bench facing the ocean. Before we leave Earth, the guide says softly, there is one final task. No machinery? No. No checklist? The guide smiles. Only yourself. You sit. The stone still holds a trace of warmth gathered during the afternoon sunlight. The ocean breathes in. The ocean breathes out. The rhythm is impossibly slow. Close your eyes. You do. Do not force relaxation. It cannot be forced. Simply notice. A cool breeze brushes gently across your forehead. The distant cry of a seabird fades into silence. Far above, although you cannot see them with your eyes closed, countless stars continue their patient burning. The guide's voice becomes quieter still. Notice your breathing. Nothing else. Just the breath. Air enters. Air leaves. Again. 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 No destination. No achievement. Only movement. Your shoulders gradually loosen. Muscles you did not realize were tense begin releasing their quiet burden. The weight of unfinished conversations slowly dissolves. Tomorrow's responsibilities can wait. Yesterday's regrets have already become light traveling away from you. Like distant stars, they still exist. But they no longer possess the gravity to hold you. The guide continues. Feel the earth beneath you. Not the stone. Not the platform. The planet itself. Beneath your feet lies nearly 6,400 kilometers of living world. A thin crust of rock. A vast mantle flowing so slowly that mountains drift like leaves upon an invisible river. A metallic core hotter than the surface of the sun. Everything beneath you has been moving continuously for billions of years. Yet here, it feels perfectly still. This is one of Earth's oldest gifts. Motion disguised as peace. The guide allows another silence to grow. It stretches naturally. Unhurried. Then, tonight we leave this world. Not forever. Only long enough to remember what it truly is. A home. Not a prison. A beginning. Not an ending. Some people travel across oceans searching for themselves. Others cross deserts. Some climb mountains. We will travel farther than all of them. not to escape life, but to see it clearly. When you return, even the smallest sunrise may look different. The breeze becomes lighter. Somewhere nearby, almost too quiet to hear, an electric system awakens within the Serenity. There is no roar, no vibration. Only the faintest harmonic hum, like a crystal bowl singing somewhere beyond hearing. The spacecraft is waking. Patiently. As though it has been waiting not merely for passengers, but for a state of mind. The guide opens their eyes. You do the same. The Milky Way now appears brighter than before. Or perhaps you have simply remembered how to see it. The guide stands and extends one hand. It is time. The invitation is neither command nor request. It is simply the opening of a door. Behind you waits the familiar world. Ahead lies the infinite silence between the stars. You rise without hesitation. Together, beneath the oldest sky humanity has ever known, you begin walking toward the Serenity. And somewhere far above, hidden among countless constellations, the universe quietly welcomes another traveler. The walkway leading toward the Serenity seemed longer than it had from a distance. Not because of its actual length, but because every step carried you farther away from the familiar gravity of ordinary life. Behind you, Earth remained unchanged. The ocean continued folding gentle waves upon its shore. The night winds still carried the scent of salt and pine from the distant coastline. Somewhere beyond the dark horizon, millions of people slept beneath glowing apartment windows, their dreams woven from unfinished conversations, tomorrow's obligations, and memories too heavy to set down. None of them knew that, on this quiet stretch of coastline, another journey had already begun. Not a mission, not an expedition, but a farewell, not to Earth itself, but to the noise that so often surrounded it. The guide walked several paces ahead, never hurrying. Their footsteps echoed softly across the polished platform. Each sound dissolved into the night almost as soon as it was born. Silence always seemed to reclaim everything here. As you approached, the Serenity revealed details impossible to notice from afar. Its surface was unlike the metallic skin of conventional spacecraft, with no rows of exposed rivets or dark scorch marks. Instead, the hull resembled polished stone sculpted by centuries of flowing water. Its ceramic exterior reflected moonlight with a soft pearlescent glow, changing almost imperceptibly as clouds drifted across the stars. It felt less like a machine and more like something patiently grown. A vessel shaped by quiet, defying conventional spaceship aesthetics, emphasizing its unique, natural-feeling design. The guide rested one hand against the smooth hull, a subtle gesture of connection. It surprises almost everyone. Main_subject asks, "What does?" The guide responds, "They expect technology to feel cold." A gentle smile appeared on the guide's face. They emphasized, "But the farther humanity travels into the universe, the more we discover that comfort is not a luxury. It is survival, essential for prolonged journeys beyond Earth." You allowed your fingertips to touch the surface. It was warmer than expected. Not warm like sunlight on stone, nor warm like living skin, but a gentle temperature in perfect equilibrium with its surroundings. It was neither giving away heat nor absorbing it, simply existing almost effortlessly. This unique quality underscored the ship's advanced design, seamlessly integrating with its environment and passengers' needs. The guide continued, emphasizing, "Every material aboard the Serenity was chosen for one singular reason: to reduce unnecessary effort for its occupants. In the vast expanse of space, even the slightest discomfort has significant weight and consequence." The words lingered, a profound thought you had never considered. Every sharp edge, every harsh light, every sudden noise, every constant vibration, each subtle element silently demanded a little more precious attention from the human mind. And attention, the guide implied, was a critically limited resource that must be conserved. This insight profoundly shifted your perspective, suggesting even subtle environmental factors significantly contribute to mental fatigue and strain. Perhaps peace itself could genuinely be engineered, and silence could remarkably become architecture, actively shaping experience. The ship's innovative design aimed not just for optimal functionality, but for a profound psychological tranquility among its inhabitants. Ahead, a circular doorway rested seamlessly within the hull. There were no visible hinges, no mechanical locks, no heavy airlock wheels like those found aboard earlier spacecraft. Only a faint silver ring surrounding the entrance. The guide stopped before it, explaining, "The Serenity recognizes intention." You inquired, "You mean a biometric scan, like those in old science fiction?" The guide chuckled softly. That method would have only impressed engineers 2 centuries ago. "No," the guide clarified, their voice calm. "It measures something much quieter, something deeply innate within a traveler's purpose." You looked at the doorway again, observing its serene, unchanging surface, wondering what subtle cues it might truly detect. Nothing happened immediately. The guide simply stood there, breathing naturally, patiently waiting. After several calm seconds, the faint silver ring began glowing with an almost imperceptible blue light, resembling moonlight reflecting upon still water. Without a sound, the circular doorway separated into overlapping petals that slid gently aside with serene grace. There was no hiss of escaping pressure, no clattering mechanisms, only smooth motion, feeling almost organic in its silent, elegant unfolding. Warm air drifted outward from the newly opened passage, carrying a faint, complex fragrance unlike anything you had experienced before. Hints of rich cedar, cool rain-soaked stone, and fresh linen drying beneath spring sunlight. None of those distinct scents dominated the blend. Instead, they seamlessly merged into something strangely familiar, as though your deep memory recognized it instantly before your conscious senses could fully identify its individual components. "What is that smell?" you asked, utterly intrigued by the unique, comforting aroma. The guide looked pleased, a slight smile playing on their lips. "Home," they simply stated, revealing the profound depth of the ship's design. Seeing your puzzled expression, the guide gently elaborated, "The human brain forms powerful, intrinsic associations between scent and safety, a primal response. Every traveler experiences this phenomenon differently, as it isn't the air physically changing, it is, quite simply, your deep memory." You stepped through the welcoming doorway, and instantly, the entire outside world seemed to gently fade. It didn't disappear entirely, but only softened around the edges. The wind could no longer be heard, and the distant ocean became little more than a whisper. Inside the Serenity, silence possessed an entirely different quality than you had ever known. It was not merely the absence of sound or noise, but rather the profound absence of all interruption, creating an unprecedented sense of deep calm. The entrance chamber elegantly opened into a broad, circular atrium bathed in a warm, inviting amber light. Strikingly, there were no exposed control panels covering every surface, no flashing warning indicators, and absolutely no tangled bundles of wiring. Instead, gracefully curved walls flowed seamlessly into the floor and ceiling, creating an immediate, unified impression that the entire interior space had been meticulously carved from a single, vast piece of luminous ivory. Light emerged from nowhere in particular. There were no visible lamps or fixtures. The walls themselves seemed to glow softly and uniformly, imitating the gentle, comforting color of sunrise just before dawn. The entire atmosphere felt less like boarding a conventional spacecraft and significantly more like entering a quiet, ancient monastery serenely hidden among the mountains. You instinctively lowered your voice, not because anyone explicitly asked you to, but simply because the room itself profoundly invited stillness. The guide noticed your softened tone, nodding. Architecture profoundly influences thought. We habitually build noisy buildings, and consequently, our minds become noisy. Conversely, we build peaceful spaces, and eventually, our very breathing remembers and adapts to tranquility. The floor beneath your feet possessed an almost invisible, subtle softness. It wasn't enough to make you feel unstable or unbalanced, only just enough to gently absorb each footstep before it had a chance to echo, thus enhancing the pervasive, profound silence. You walked farther into the expansive atrium, finding every movement seemed strangely graceful and effortless within this space. The deliberate absence of harsh angles allowed your eyes to drift naturally from one gentle curve to another without interruption. Nothing demanded attention, nothing competed for it. Your gaze settled upon a magnificent, transparent dome overhead, revealing a breathtaking vista. Beyond it, the stars appeared even brighter than before. Without Earth's thick atmosphere scattering light, every distant constellation appeared astonishingly sharp and clear. Tiny blue stars, immense golden giants, and red dwarfs glowed like distant, ethereal embers. Dark rivers of cosmic dust separated bright fields of countless suns, presenting a truly breathtaking panorama of the vast, silent cosmos. The guide stood beside you, pointing upward. "This dome isn't ordinary glass." You asked, "What exactly is it?" "A crystalline observation membrane," the guide explained. "It automatically filters all harmful radiation, yet it absolutely refuses to interfere with the inherent beauty of the view." You smiled, a genuine appreciation for the philosophy. "I didn't know engineering could possibly sound so poetic." The guide responded with a knowing look. "Everything truly becomes poetic when you design and build it specifically for human hearts instead of merely for machines." The profound words settled quietly inside you, resonating deeply. For generations, humanity had primarily imagined spacecraft as cramped, utilitarian cylinders packed solely with equipment, places where mere survival came first, and any semblance of beauty was a distant second. Here, remarkably, beauty had become an intrinsic, vital part of survival. Far across the vast atrium, a magnificent spiral staircase curved gracefully upward without any visible supports, an architectural marvel. Its elegant handrail emitted a faint, comforting silver glow. Above, several observation levels disappeared into soft shadows. Below, another staircase mysteriously descended toward areas hidden from view. The guide gestured upward, a subtle invitation. "Your cabin is above." As you began climbing, you immediately noticed something unexpected. There was absolutely no sensation of physical effort, as if gravity felt remarkably lighter. "Artificial gravity?" you inquired, a hint of surprise in your voice. "Partially," the guide replied calmly. "The ship has already begun gently reducing Earth's gravitational pull, very slowly. Your body hardly notices, yet the mind accepts profound change more easily when it arrives gradually and without abruptness." Again, the ship seemed designed predominantly around human psychology rather than mere machinery or raw power. Each step upward revealed new, carefully placed windows opening toward different, magnificent regions of the night sky, offering diverse and breathtaking cosmic views. One expertly framed window showcased the glowing arc of Earth's distant horizon. Another perfectly overlooked the silent moon, suspended serenely above absolute darkness. Yet another revealed nothing but infinite, glittering stars stretching endlessly beyond imagination. Each window had been placed with extraordinary intention, not merely to provide a view, but to intrinsically create moments of profound contemplation. Finally, the guide stopped before a quiet, unassuming wooden door. This was real wood, its natural grain shimmered invitingly beneath the warm, ambient light. You instinctively reached out, a primal connection to something familiar. "The universe contains countless worlds," the guide said softly, their voice carrying a quiet wisdom. "But people still relax most quickly and profoundly when touching the familiar, comforting surface of a tree." The simple truth resonated deeply within you, linking innate comfort to natural elements. The door opened silently, revealing your cabin. It was simple, yet profoundly welcoming. A comfortable bed faced an immense panoramic window, offering an immediate connection to the cosmos. A single bookshelf stood against one wall, though empty now. It patiently waited for stories yet to be collected. Beside the panoramic window rested a small, elegantly designed chair upholstered in soft gray fabric. Nothing more. Nothing unnecessary. The guide remained near the doorway, observing your reaction to the minimalist, purposeful space. "You may find this room surprisingly empty," the guide remarked, a hint of curiosity in their voice. "It is," you agreed, taking in the serene spaciousness. "That is intentional," the guide smiled, gently explaining the profound philosophy behind the sparse design. "Space is already full," the guide elaborated, gesturing broadly. "Full of stars, galaxies, nebulae, and time itself. If we filled this physical room too, where then would your most valuable thoughts possibly have the necessary room to truly breathe and expand?" You walked deliberately toward the great window, drawn by its immense vista. Earth floated majestically beyond it. Blue, white, and fragile, yet still impossibly beautiful, a breathtaking sight from the serene solitude and secure embrace of the ship. From this unique, elevated angle, Earth's delicate atmosphere appeared as a vibrant, intricate sapphire thread gently embracing the entire planet. So thin, so impossibly thin, it was a vivid, sobering reminder of Earth's inherent beauty and profound vulnerability. Everything humanity had ever loved, every vast ocean, every verdant forest, every bustling city, every poignant poem, every joyful laugh, every bittersweet goodbye, every child who had ever looked up at the stars with wonder, all of it existed beneath that fragile, shimmering ribbon of air. Without thinking, you instinctively placed one hand upon the cool window, connecting visually and emotionally with the distant home below. The guide spoke almost in a whisper, their voice carrying a timeless truth: never forget this view. No traveler ever truly does. A comfortable, shared silence followed, a moment of profound understanding between you and the guide. Then, the guide reached into the pocket of their coat and removed a small, intriguing object, no larger than a smooth river stone, its surface shimmering faintly with tiny points of silver light. The guide placed it gently into your open hand. "What is it?" you asked, your curiosity piqued by the shimmering object. "A memory compass," the guide replied, their eyes twinkling. "It doesn't point north. It points inward." You looked closely at the tiny, embedded stars within its translucent surface. "They're moving," you observed, a touch of wonder in your voice. "Yes," the guide confirmed. "They're real. A live, dynamic projection of the actual sky beyond the ship. So wherever we travel," the guide continued, their voice reassuring, "this compass ensures you'll always remember precisely where home once stood among the stars, a fixed point in the ever-expanding cosmos." The compass symbolized a lasting, profound connection to Earth. For a long moment, neither of you spoke, enveloped in the room's profound peace. The atmosphere felt peaceful enough that even silence itself seemed a welcome, comforting company. Then, somewhere deep within the Serenity, a single, almost inaudible, resonant tone echoed gently through the hall. The guide smiled. "The ship is ready." Outside the panoramic window, the countless stars waited in perfect, unwavering stillness. Soon, for the very first time in your life, Earth would definitively begin to fall away beneath your feet, and the infinite universe would open its oldest, most ancient road before you. Nothing happened. Or at least, nothing happened in the way you had expected. There was no voice counting backward from 10. No brilliant flood of fire illuminating the launch platform. No violent shaking beneath your feet. No deafening roar powerful enough to rattle the bones inside your chest. The universe, it seemed, had no interest in dramatic entrances. Instead, the Serenity waited. Completely still. You remained standing beside the great observation window, the memory compass resting quietly in your hand. Beyond the transparent hull, the familiar coastline of Earth lay wrapped in moonlight. The waves continued their endless conversation with the shore, unaware that the ship overlooking them was preparing to leave the planet forever, or at least, for a little while. The guide entered the cabin without making a sound. There is one final lesson before departure. You turned. I thought we were already ready. The guide smiled. The ship is. A brief pause. The question is whether your heartbeat is. The words were not a challenge. Only an invitation. The guide walked toward the panoramic window and stood beside you. Human beings often believe that movement begins with force. A runner pushes against the ground. A bird beats its wings. A rocket ignites thousands of tons of fuel. So we assume that every great journey must begin with violence. The guide looked toward the stars. But the universe rarely behaves that way. They lifted one finger toward the night sky. The moon never roars around Earth. Earth never strains as it circles the sun. The sun itself glides silently around the center of our galaxy at nearly 220 kilometers every second. And yet, you hear none of it. The guide allowed those words to settle. Speed is not the opposite of peace. Noise is. You found yourself breathing more slowly. Outside, the stars seemed perfectly motionless. Yet you knew they were not. Every one of them was moving. Every galaxy was drifting. Every planet was falling endlessly through space. The entire universe was in motion. And almost all of it unfolded in silence. A soft chime echoed throughout the ship. Not electronic. Not mechanical. More like the gentle vibration of crystal touched by flowing water. The guide inclined their head. Now. We begin. Without any visible controls being touched, the lights inside the cabin shifted almost imperceptibly. The warm amber glow gradually softened into a pale golden hue. The transition was so gentle that you barely noticed it happening. Nothing inside the Serenity ever seemed eager to attract attention. Even change itself arrived politely. A calm voice filled the room. Not artificial. Not human. Somehow both. Internal systems synchronized. Environmental equilibrium achieved. Ion propulsion array online. Departure sequence initiated. The voice spoke without urgency. Each sentence was separated by several quiet seconds, allowing every word to breathe. The guide looked toward you. Close your eyes. You obeyed. What do you feel? You listened carefully. Nothing. No vibration beneath your feet. No acceleration pressing against your body. No trembling walls. No shifting furniture. Only your own breathing. I don't think we've moved. The guide smiled. We already have. You opened your eyes. At first, everything appeared unchanged. The ocean remained below. The launch platform still surrounded the ship. The stars continued shining overhead. Then something caught your attention. The shadows. They were changing. Slowly. almost too slowly to notice.
The angle of the moonlight upon the platform had shifted.
Not because the moon had moved.
Because the Serenity had. The spacecraft was rising.
1 centimeter. Then another. Then another. Without sound. Without visible effort. It simply separated itself from Earth. As effortlessly as a leaf lifting from the surface of still water. The guide folded their hands behind their back. Ion engines. They produce far less thrust than chemical rockets. So how can they lift the ship? They cannot. A quiet smile. You looked puzzled. The guide continued. The Serenity does not fight gravity. It negotiates with it. Seeing your curiosity, they explained further. Traditional rockets rely almost entirely upon brute force. They throw enormous quantities of mass downward. The reaction lifts them upward. A magnificent solution. But not the only one. Our vessel uses gravitational field modulation during departure. The ion engines provide guidance. The field carries most of the weight. You looked again toward the coastline. Already the launch platform seemed strangely distant. The people working below, if any remained, had become invisible. Only the ocean reflected the moonlight now. Wide. Silver. Peaceful. You searched instinctively for the feeling of climbing. Your inner ear insisted you were standing perfectly still. Your eyes quietly disagreed. Earth was descending. The guide seemed amused by your expression. The human brain measures motion through change. If everything around you moves together, you feel nothing. Outside the window, the shoreline drifted away. The sea expanded. Clouds floated beneath you like islands of white silk scattered across dark water. The launch complex became no larger than a seashell resting beside the coast. No smoke followed the ship. No burning exhaust scarred the night. No thunder echoed across the sleeping landscape. The world simply grew smaller. A flock of seabirds crossed below. For a brief moment, they flew alongside the ascending spacecraft before continuing toward the open ocean. One bird turned slightly, its white wings catching moonlight. Then it disappeared into darkness. The guide watched them leave. They have no idea they were among the last living creatures to see us from Earth. You followed the birds until they vanished completely. A strange feeling settled inside you. Not sadness. Not excitement. Something quieter. A growing awareness that every journey is measured not only by where we arrive, but also by what slowly disappears behind us. The ship continued rising. 10 meters. 50. 100. 500. Still. No sound. No shaking. The atmosphere outside gradually became thinner. The air lost its familiar haze. The stars sharpened. Constellations that had seemed faint from the ground now blazed with astonishing clarity. The guide pointed toward the western horizon. Do you notice the colors? You did. Near the edge of Earth, the sky no longer faded smoothly into black. Instead, delicate bands emerged. Deep cobalt, indigo, royal blue, then violet.
Then a ribbon of crimson barely visible above the sleeping world. Each layer represented sunlight scattered through different densities of atmosphere.
The air is becoming thinner. Exactly. The atmosphere does not end suddenly. It becomes less.
The guide seemed to enjoy that word. Nature rarely believes in sharp boundaries.
Night becomes dawn. Winter becomes spring. The sea becomes mist. Even Earth becomes space. You stood in silence, watching those invisible layers unfold beneath you.
Somewhere below, every storm, every city, every mountain and every forest still existed.
Yet from this height, none of them argued with one another. Borders had vanished. Countries had disappeared. Roads were invisible. Only one world remained. Blue. Whole. Beautiful. The guide spoke so quietly that the words almost blended with your breathing. Distance is an extraordinary teacher. It removes detail and reveals truth. Another gentle tone resonated through the ship. Altitude, 30 kilometers. The calm voice paused. Transition into the upper stratosphere. Outside, the sky deepened toward velvet.
The stars multiplied again.
You realized that the darkness surrounding them was not empty. It was alive with countless faint points of light waiting patiently for human eyes to notice them. The guide rested one hand upon the window. There is a moment during every departure when travelers stop thinking about where they are going and begin understanding where they have been. You looked down. Earth no longer resembled the world you had always known. It had become
a luminous sphere wrapped in impossibly delicate light.
A cradle suspended within infinite darkness.
The memory compass in your hand glowed softly. Its tiny stars slowly rearranged themselves to match the changing sky beyond the ship.
Without realizing it, you smiled. The guide noticed. Your mind is becoming quieter. How can you tell? Because you have stopped asking how fast we are moving. You laughed softly. It was true.
The numbers no longer mattered.
Velocity had become meaningless.
Only the experience remained.
Far below, the ocean reflected the moon one final time before clouds drifted between them.
The last familiar sound of Earth had long since faded. Inside the Serenity, only breathing remained.
Your own. The guide's. And the gentle heartbeat of a ship
that seemed less interested in conquering space than in teaching its passengers how to belong within it.
Ahead lay the higher atmosphere. Beyond that,
the threshold where blue skies surrendered to the stars.
And the Serenity continued its ascent, so quietly that even silence seemed to welcome it as one of its own.
By the time the first edge of Earth began to curve beneath the horizon, you no longer felt like a passenger.
You felt like a witness. There is a difference. Passengers anticipate destinations. Witnesses simply allow reality to unfold. The distinction is subtle.
Yet somewhere between the quiet launch and the thinning atmosphere, your thoughts had begun to change.
Questions no longer rushed toward answers.
Instead, they drifted gently through your mind like clouds crossing a calm morning sky.
The Serenity continued its ascent with the same effortless grace.
No vibration disturbed the cabin.
No alarms interrupted the silence. No engines demanded attention.
If not for the changing view outside the panoramic window, you could almost believe the ship had remained perfectly still. Only Earth was moving.
Or so it seemed. The guide entered carrying 2 small porcelain cups. Steam rose lazily from each one. The aroma was delicate. Hints of chamomile. A trace of jasmine. Something faintly reminiscent of cedar forests after rain. The guide handed 1 cup to you. Tea? You looked at the steaming liquid, then toward the stars. We're drinking tea during launch? The guide laughed softly. When would be a better time? You accepted the cup. The porcelain felt pleasantly warm against your hands. Its warmth spread slowly into your fingertips. There was something profoundly comforting about such an ordinary gesture in such an extraordinary place. The guide took a careful sip. Human history often separates the magnificent from the ordinary. A rocket launch belongs to history. A cup of tea belongs to everyday life. But the universe has never recognized that distinction. Another sip. A quiet moment is still a quiet moment. Whether it happens in a kitchen or halfway to the stars. You smiled. Outside the window, the sky had deepened into an astonishing shade of indigo. The familiar blue overhead was disappearing. Above it stretched a darkness unlike any night seen from Earth's surface. It was not empty. It shimmered. Thousands upon thousands of stars emerged with startling clarity. Without the dense lower atmosphere scattering light, each star shone with remarkable precision. Some burned with icy blue brilliance. Others glowed golden, amber, or faint crimson. You noticed that they no longer seemed to twinkle. They're perfectly steady. The guide nodded. Stars do not twinkle. They never have. You looked puzzled. They only appear to twinkle because Earth's atmosphere is constantly moving. The light bends through countless pockets of air with different temperatures and densities. It is the atmosphere that dances. The stars remain still. You watched one bright blue star near the eastern horizon. Its light no longer shimmered. It burned with quiet certainty. For the first time in your life, you were seeing a star as it truly was. The realization lingered. How many things, you wondered, appear unstable simply because we observe them through turbulent air? The guide seemed to anticipate your thoughts. Sometimes peace is not something we create. We simply rise above the layer that distorts it. Silence followed. Not an empty silence. A meaningful one. Outside, delicate wisps of cloud floated far below. From this altitude they no longer resembled weather. They looked like brushstrokes painted across a vast blue canvas. Entire storm systems appeared as elegant spirals turning slowly across the oceans. Some stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Yet from here, they seemed impossibly gentle. The guide pointed toward one enormous white formation. A hurricane. You stared. It doesn't look frightening.
No, distance changes emotion. What terrifies us from within often becomes beautiful when viewed from beyond. You continued watching the immense spiral.
Somewhere beneath those clouds, waves towered over ships. Rain lashed coastlines. Winds uprooted forests. Yet here,
the storm resembled a white flower blooming quietly upon the sea.
Perhaps perspective did not erase suffering. Perhaps it simply reminded us that suffering was never the whole picture.
A gentle tone resonated through the cabin.
Altitude, 68 kilometers. The voice paused. Approaching the mesosphere. The guide looked toward the darkening horizon. We're entering one of the least visited regions surrounding Earth. The mesosphere? Yes.
It begins roughly 50 kilometers above the surface and extends to about 85 kilometers.
What makes it special? The guide smiled.
It is where most meteors meet their end.
You looked outward instinctively. They burn here? Exactly.
Every shooting star you've ever wished upon
was usually no larger than a grain of sand. The guide let that thought settle. Tiny fragments of ancient rock enter Earth's atmosphere at extraordinary speeds. Sometimes more than 70 kilometers every second.
The air becomes so compressed before them that it glows.
Not because the meteor is on fire, but because the atmosphere itself becomes incandescent.
You imagine countless invisible particles colliding with Earth every single day.
Tiny messengers from the early solar system. Most vanished long before reaching the ground.
For millions of years they had silently painted brief streaks of light across the night sky.
Beautiful endings. For ancient beginnings. The guide watched your expression. The universe wastes very little. Even destruction becomes light. Far ahead, the darkness deepened further.
The blue sky had almost disappeared entirely. Only a narrow ribbon of sapphire clung to the curved horizon.
Above it, the cosmos opened completely. The Milky Way no longer resembled a faint cloud. It stretched across the heavens with astonishing complexity. Dense rivers of starlight flowed between dark lanes of interstellar dust. Clusters sparkled like scattered diamonds. Nebulae appeared as subtle veils of silver mist.
You had seen photographs. None of them prepared you for the quiet immensity of seeing it with your own eyes.
No camera had ever captured the feeling. Only the image.
The guide spoke softly.
Our ancestors gave it many names. The river of heaven.
The path of souls.
The silver road. Today we call it the Milky Way. But perhaps every civilization has simply been trying to describe the same feeling. What feeling?
The guide looked toward the glowing band crossing the sky.
That home is larger than we imagined. You stood together without speaking. Minutes passed. Perhaps longer. Time itself seemed to slow inside the Serenity. Not because clocks had stopped, but because nothing demanded that they continue.
The memory compass glowed faintly within your pocket.
Its tiny stars shifted almost imperceptibly, matching the heavens outside.
Then something extraordinary happened. The horizon changed.
At first, it was almost invisible.
The brilliant blue surrounding Earth grew thinner.
thinner still, until it became a luminous line embracing the entire planet. A thread, no wider than the edge of a fingernail from your perspective. Yet that fragile ribbon contained nearly every breath ever taken by humanity. The guide's voice became almost reverent. There. The atmosphere. From here. It finally reveals how delicate it truly is. You leaned closer to the window. The blue line shimmered softly beneath sunlight still hidden beyond Earth's horizon. It was breathtaking and unsettling. Everything alive on Earth depended upon that impossibly thin veil. Every forest, every whale, every eagle, every child, every melody, every language, every story ever written, protected by a layer of air so thin that, from space, it looked almost imaginary. The guide continued quietly. People often speak of saving the planet. A gentle smile crossed their face. The planet will survive. It has survived asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, ice ages. The question has never been whether Earth will endure. The guide rested one hand upon the window. The question is whether this delicate blue breath will continue to shelter us. You remained silent. No speech seemed worthy of the view. Far below, continents drifted beneath scattered clouds. No borders marked their surfaces. No cities could be seen. No evidence of conflict. The world appeared astonishingly peaceful. The guide looked toward you. Do you know why astronauts often return changed? You shook your head. They stop seeing nations. They begin seeing neighborhoods. Another pause. They stop seeing strangers. They begin seeing fellow passengers. Outside the window, Earth slowly rotated. Sunlight approached from beyond the eastern curve. Without warning, the first golden rays reached the atmosphere. The thin blue line erupted into color. Electric sapphire, emerald, amber, rose gold, violet. For several breathtaking seconds, the entire edge of the planet glowed like the rim of a priceless jewel suspended in infinite darkness. Neither you nor the guide spoke. Some moments ask only to be witnessed. Then, the sun appeared. Not rising. Simply emerging. A brilliant white star crossing the edge of Earth with calm inevitability. Light flooded the cabin. The walls responded automatically, softening its intensity without diminishing its beauty. Warm gold spread across the porcelain cup still resting beside the window. The guide smiled. You've just watched 16 sunrises. You blinked. 16? We've been climbing long enough that Earth has rotated beneath us. Out here, morning arrives differently. You looked back toward the radiant planet. The realization settled gently into your heart. Day and night had never belonged to the sun. They belonged to perspective. At that very moment, another soft tone echoed through the Serenity. Altitude, 100 kilometers. A brief silence followed. Then the calm voice spoke again. Crossing the Kármán line. Official boundary of space. Nothing dramatic happened. No invisible wall. No sudden jolt. No brilliant flash. Only a sentence. And a quiet understanding.
Some boundaries exist not because nature created them, but because humanity needed a name for wonder. The guide bowed their head ever so slightly.
Welcome to space.
You looked through the panoramic window one last time.
Behind you floated the blue planet. Ahead stretched an ocean without shores.
And somewhere, hidden among the countless stars waiting in silence, the next chapter of your journey had already begun. The first thing you noticed after crossing into space was not the silence. You had already grown accustomed to silence aboard the Serenity.
Nor was it the endless field of stars.
That, too, had gradually become familiar.
It was the color.
Earth was changing.
Slowly. Almost imperceptibly. From the observation deck, the planet no longer appeared as a simple blue sphere suspended in darkness.
Instead, it seemed wrapped in countless layers of living light.
Deep sapphire embraced the oceans. Clouds glowed with soft ivory.
The continents reflected muted shades of emerald, ochre, and rust. Yet surrounding all of it was something so delicate that it seemed impossible.
A luminous veil.
Blue near the surface, fading gently into indigo, then violet, finally dissolving into the blackness of interplanetary space.
It resembled the translucent petal of an enormous flower. Fragile. Weightless. Alive. The guide stood quietly beside the panoramic dome, watching the colors shift. Most people imagine Earth's atmosphere as invisible. It usually is. Only because we are living inside it. The guide traced a gentle arc in the air with one finger.
But distance allows us to see what closeness hides.
You found yourself unable to look away. The atmosphere appeared impossibly thin.
At its brightest point, it glowed like liquid sapphire poured along the edge of the world. Farther outward, the blue slowly surrendered to violet, creating a gradient so smooth that no artist could truly capture it.
Why purple? You asked almost instinctively. The guide smiled. A beautiful question. The answer did not arrive immediately.
Instead, the guide allowed several quiet breaths to pass. As though every explanation deserved time to unfold naturally.
Sunlight appears white. But it is composed of every visible color.
When that light enters Earth's atmosphere, billions upon billions of molecules scatter the shorter wavelengths much more efficiently than the longer ones.
You nodded slowly. Blue light. Exactly.
During the day, scattered blue light fills the sky above every mountain, every forest, every city.
The guide looked toward the glowing horizon. But from here, we are seeing the atmosphere sideways.
Not through a few kilometers, but through hundreds. The colors begin blending.
Blue. Indigo. Violet.
The atmosphere becomes a prism wrapped around an entire world.
You remain silent. Science had never sounded so gentle. The explanation did not diminish the beauty, it deepened it. The guide continued. Understanding has never been the enemy of wonder. If anything, it allows wonder to become larger.
Outside, sunlight continued pouring across the curved edge of Earth. The violet ribbon shimmered softly, changing intensity as the planet slowly rotated beneath you.
Every second revealed new subtleties. New gradients. New textures hidden within light itself.
Nothing remained completely still.
Yet nothing hurried.
It occurred to you that this was how the universe preferred to reveal itself. Not through sudden spectacle, but through patient observation.
The guide seemed to sense your thoughts.
Most cosmic events unfold so slowly that a single human lifetime witnesses only a fraction of them.
A mountain rises.
A glacier retreats.
A galaxy turns. Stars are born. Stars die.
To the universe, all of these are gentle movements. You rested both hands upon the observation rail. Below, thin strands of cloud stretched across the Pacific Ocean. From orbit they resembled white brushstrokes painted by an impossibly careful hand. Some cloud systems spiraled for thousands of kilometers.
Others drifted as delicate feathers suspended above the sea. None revealed the storms hidden within.
The guide spoke softly.
When viewed from enough distance, chaos often becomes pattern. And pattern becomes peace. You thought about your own life. Moments that once felt overwhelming. Days filled with worry. Conversations replayed endlessly in your thoughts.
From close enough, everything had seemed urgent. Now, floating hundreds of kilometers above Earth, those memories felt strangely different.
Not erased. Simply smaller.
Like cities disappearing beneath cloud cover.
The guide noticed your quiet smile. The universe is not asking you to forget. It is only inviting you to widen your perspective.
A soft harmonic tone drifted through the ship.
Orbital insertion complete.
The calm onboard voice continued.
Primary ion propulsion preparing for interplanetary acceleration. No alarms followed. No sudden movement.
Only another gentle sentence.
The guide turned toward you. We've reached the end of Earth's immediate embrace. What happens now?
The guide looked toward the stars.
Now, we begin falling around the sun.
The phrase sounded impossible.
We're falling? We always have been.
So has Earth.
So has every planet. So has the moon. So has every comet you've ever admired. You looked again toward the blue planet. It doesn't feel like falling.
That is because falling and orbiting are nearly the same thing.
The guide extended one hand, gently mimicking a circle. Imagine throwing a stone. It falls.
Throw it faster, it travels farther before reaching the ground.
Throw it fast enough, it never reaches the ground at all. It keeps falling while Earth curves away beneath it. You watch the planet turning silently below. So that's an orbit. The guide nodded. A perpetual fall. Balanced perfectly by motion.
The words settled into your thoughts.
Gravity. Something you had always imagined as an invisible force pulling everything downward. Now you realized there was no universal down. Only attraction. Only relationships between masses. Only endless falling. And endless balance. Outside the dome, sunlight illuminated the upper atmosphere with increasing brilliance. The violet band slowly faded as the Serenity drifted farther away. Distance was gently dissolving Earth's finest details. Soon, individual cloud formations became impossible to distinguish. Mountain ranges blended into soft shades of brown and green. Oceans merged into one immense sapphire mirror reflecting the sun.
The guide remained watching. There comes a moment during every voyage when travelers stop looking back because they are afraid, and begin looking back because they are grateful. You realized that moment had quietly arrived. You no longer feared leaving Earth. Instead, you felt thankful that such a world existed at all.
The guide reached toward a nearby wall. Without touching it, the observation dome subtly transformed.
Tiny labels appeared across the stars.
Elegant. Minimal. Almost transparent. Not intrusive. Merely helpful.
A bright point near the horizon.
Venus. Far beyond. A tiny amber star. Mars. Higher still. A brilliant white beacon. Jupiter.
The labels faded after a few seconds, leaving only the sky itself.
The ship only introduces them. The guide explained. It never allows information to replace experience. You appreciated that. Knowledge should illuminate beauty, not compete with it. Another silence unfolded naturally. Then the guide asked an unexpected question. What is the oldest thing you've ever touched? You thought carefully. Perhaps an ancient tree. A weathered stone. A centuries-old building. I don't know. The guide nodded toward the observation window. You're looking at something older. You frowned slightly. Earth? No. The sunlight. The guide smiled gently. The photons striking Earth's atmosphere left the sun just over 8 minutes ago.
But the atoms producing that light were forged billions of years earlier.
You looked again at the brilliant glow washing across the planet. Hydrogen becoming helium. Fusion deep within the solar core.
Energy taking thousands of years to reach the sun's surface, then racing across 150 million kilometers of empty space, only to arrive here.
Quietly. Faithfully. Every morning. The guide continued. The light warming your face today began its journey long before you noticed it.
So do many beautiful things. Those words lingered longer than expected.
You thought of kindness. Friendship. Healing. Forgiveness. Perhaps they, too, often began long before anyone recognized them.
The ship's gentle voice returned.
Course confirmed. Destination, the inner solar plane. Outside, Earth had already become noticeably smaller. Still magnificent. Still unmistakably blue. Yet no longer filling the heavens. It now floated peacefully against an ocean of stars. The guide folded their hands. Every departure creates space. So does every goodbye. The memory compass resting in your pocket pulsed once. Softly. Its tiny stars shifted almost imperceptibly. Matching the changing heavens beyond the hull. The guide noticed. It has accepted your journey. What does that mean? It no longer points toward where you were. A warm smile appeared. It now points toward where your wonder will grow. Far ahead, beyond the shrinking Earth, beyond the orbit of the moon, beyond the silent pathways traveled by every planet, a faint golden glow stretched across the darkness. so delicate that it almost disappeared into the black. The guide followed your gaze. There. What is it? The first road. The ancient river every planet has followed since the birth of the solar system. You stared at the distant band of light. It seemed too subtle to be real. Like dust suspended inside a single ray of morning sunlight. Yet it extended across millions upon millions of kilometers. Waiting. Patiently. The guide's voice became almost a whisper. In the beginning, there was only a cloud. And tomorrow, I will show you what remains of it. The golden river shimmered faintly ahead. The Serenity adjusted its course with a movement so gentle that only the stars themselves seemed to notice. And together, you sailed toward the oldest lighted pathway in the solar system, the silent, glowing ribbon known as the Zodiacal Light. The following cycle aboard the Serenity did not begin with an alarm clock. There were no schedules posted on walls. No loud announcements. No artificial urgency. Instead, you awoke naturally. As though sleep itself had decided your rest was complete. For a few moments, you remained still beneath the soft blankets of your cabin. The ship was silent. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of balance. A silence so complete that even your breathing seemed to belong to it. Beyond the panoramic window, the stars remained exactly where you remembered them. Or so it appeared. In reality, both you and the stars had traveled millions of kilometers through space since your eyes had last closed. Earth continued orbiting the Sun, the Moon continued orbiting Earth. The solar system circled the center of the Milky Way, and the galaxy drifted through cosmic darkness. Nothing had stopped moving. Yet the universe somehow preserved the illusion of stillness. It was one of its oldest tricks, and perhaps one of its greatest kindnesses. You rose and approached the window. Earth was still visible, but only barely. The planet that had once filled your sky now shone as a brilliant sapphire pearl suspended in darkness. Beautiful, fragile, and distant, the sight no longer filled you with sadness. Only gratitude remained, a quiet appreciation for this new perspective. A gentle knock sounded at the door. The guide entered carrying 2 cups, again offering tea. It was a quiet comfort, these ordinary rituals unfolding among such extraordinary surroundings. It felt like a small anchor in the vastness. I was wondering when you'd wake, the guide remarked. You accepted the warm cup. How long was I asleep, you inquired. The guide smiled gently. Long enough, they replied, an answer that somehow felt entirely sufficient, needing no further elaboration. Together, you stood before the vast observation window. Neither of you spoke for a while, just gazing out. The guide eventually broke the comfortable silence. Today, we're going to visit one of the most overlooked wonders in the solar system. You glanced toward the endless expanse of stars. A planet, you asked. No, the guide answered. A moon, you ventured again. The guide shook their heads slowly. Something far older, they revealed, a hint of ancient mystery in their voice. You waited patiently, curiosity growing. The guide pointed ahead into the void. At first, you saw nothing unusual, only darkness, stars, and a few bright planets. Then, gradually, your eyes adjusted, beginning to perceive something new and subtle. A faint glow emerged, not concentrated like a star, nor spherical like a planet. Instead, A soft golden band stretched across the darkness. It was subtle, almost ghost-like, as though someone had brushed a streak of amber silk across the vast heavens. The guide nodded, confirming your observation. There it is, they said. The Zodiacal Light. You stared, mesmerized. It was beautiful precisely because it made no effort to be, existing with an inherent grace that required no embellishment. Unlike stars, it did not sparkle with brilliant intensity. Unlike nebulae, it did not blaze with vivid, striking color. It simply existed, quietly, patiently, like a memory lingering long after the sharp details have gently faded into the mists of time. You turned to the guide. What causes it, you asked. The guide smiled knowingly. A question asked by astronomers for centuries, they replied. The guide rested both hands behind their back. Long before Earth existed, long before oceans and mountains, there was a cloud. You listened carefully, intrigued. The solar system began as an enormous rotating nebula composed of gas and dust, the guide explained. The sun formed near its center, and the planets gradually emerged from the remaining material, taking their places in orbit. The guide paused, letting the information sink in. Most people imagine that process ended billions of years ago, they continued. But some remnants of that primordial beginning still remain. You're looking at them right now, a celestial fossil. The realization settled slowly, profoundly. Dust. The enormous golden structure stretching before you consisted entirely of dust. Not towering mountains, not vibrant planets, not burning stars. Just dust. And yet, its scale was utterly incomprehensible. Millions of kilometers wide, stretching throughout the inner solar system, it was a luminous river composed of countless microscopic particles. The guide continued, comets leave dust behind. Asteroids collide. Ancient debris drifts through space. Over billions of years, the solar system has never completely cleaned its room. You laughed softly at the simple, relatable analogy. The guide seemed pleased by your reaction. It is comforting, isn't it? They asked. What is, you replied, prompted by their words. The realization that even stars leave things unfinished. The golden band gradually brightened, its subtle presence growing more defined as the Serenity approached. What had once appeared smooth now revealed subtle textures, delicate layers, and gentle variations in brightness, like invisible currents woven throughout the glowing dust. The intricate structure resembled sunlight passing through the dust-filled air of an old cathedral, transforming darkness into beauty. The guide lowered their voice, almost reverently. The particles themselves are tiny. Many are smaller than grains of sand, some even smaller than smoke. Yet together, these infinitesimal fragments create something visible across millions of kilometers, a testament to collective existence. You watched the luminous river unfold before you, and a thought emerged, so something small can matter. The guide glanced toward you, their eyes holding a deeper understanding. More than most people realize, they confirmed. Neither of you spoke again for several minutes, allowing the silent grandeur of the river to simply be, requiring only attention. Outside, countless dust particles drifted through the vacuum, each reflecting a tiny fraction of sunlight. Individually invisible, they were collectively magnificent, forming a grand tapestry across the cosmos, a silent, glittering testament to persistent existence. The guide eventually spoke, breaking the contemplative silence. Human beings often underestimate accumulation, they observed.
You turned toward them, seeking clarity.
What do you mean? You asked.
The guide pointed toward the zodiacal light, its soft glow illuminating their face.
No single particle creates this breathtaking spectacle.
No individual grain, no solitary fragment. The beauty emerges precisely because billions of small things choose to exist together, in harmony and in vast numbers, creating something greater than themselves. The guide smiled gently, drawing wider connections. So do forests, they mused.
So do oceans. So do civilizations.
The guide paused, their gaze lingering on the golden light. And so does peace, they concluded, the words resonating deeply. The words lingered in the vast silence of the ship. You thought about daily habits, small kindnesses, brief moments of gratitude, tiny decisions repeated over years. Perhaps these too were like dust particles, individually insignificant, yet collectively transformative. Outside, the glowing river expanded across the heavens, its presence growing stronger, more defined. Sunlight scattered through it in subtle shades of gold and amber. The illumination appeared almost liquid, as though the solar system itself were gently breathing. The guide activated a nearby display, and a translucent image emerged in the air before you. It was simple yet elegant. The sun appeared at its center, and around it stretched a flattened disk, thin compared to its immense width. The guide pointed to the projection. This is one reason planets orbit roughly within the same plane, they explained. The image rotated slowly. The original nebula flattened as it spun, like dough spreading across a table, though considerably larger.
You examined the projection, understanding.
Most planetary orbits clustered around the same broad plane. The solar system was less like a scattered collection of worlds, and more like a cosmic vinyl record, turning silently and gracefully through the immense emptiness of space. The guide added, the zodiacal light follows that same structure, exactly. They nodded, a profound statement hanging in the air.
We're traveling through the memory of the solar system's birth.
That powerful sentence remained with you, echoing. Not merely dust, but memory.
Ancient material left behind by creation itself.
Every particle was part of a story billions of years old. Every glimmer a surviving witness to the titanic formation of planets, a silent echo from the dawn of time.
The guide looked toward the observation dome, their expression thoughtful. Sometimes people imagine the universe as a place of endless destruction. Stars explode. Galaxies collide. Black holes consume.
Their tone held a touch of melancholy.
But then the guide's expression softened, a gentle hope emerging. But much of the cosmos is actually preservation, they clarified.
The golden river shimmered outside, a living testament.
A surviving cloud. A fossilized orbit. A particle that has wandered for millions of years. Not everything disappears.
You found unexpected comfort in that profound thought, not everything disappears.
Some things endure. Memories, influence, kindness, light.
Perhaps even the quiet, fragile parts of ourselves we fear have been lost to the relentless march of time. Far ahead, the luminous river thickened, growing richer and more intense.
Sunlight danced through the dust in ever-changing patterns. Some regions appeared brighter, others darker, like powerful currents flowing through an invisible, boundless ocean.
The guide's eyes reflected the golden glow as they spoke.
There is an old transmission stored in the archives of Epoch Echoes. You turned toward them, curious. The guide smiled faintly. It was recorded by an astronomer many generations ago. What did it say? You asked, eager for the wisdom of the past. The guide looked toward the river, their voice almost a whisper. The universe is not empty between its wonders. Silence followed, profound and echoing. The golden dust drifted endlessly beyond the hull, an ocean of light. The spaces between the great things are often great things themselves, the guide continued. You watched the Zodiacal Light, and in that moment, you understood completely. For most of your life, you had thought of space as mere emptiness separating planets and stars. Now, you were traveling through one of its hidden rivers, a structure so vast that entire worlds could float within its luminous embrace. Yet, it was so subtle that most people on Earth never knew it existed. The guide nodded toward the glowing expanse, their voice soft. The lesson of the Zodiacal Light is simple. You waited, ready to receive its ancient wisdom. The guide smiled, a knowing glint in their eyes. What appears empty often isn't. Outside, billions of ancient particles continued reflecting sunlight, tiny fragments, tiny contributions, tiny witnesses. Together, they created a river of gold stretching across the solar system. And as the Serenity sailed deeper into that luminous current, the sun shone through the dust like a distant lantern, guiding travelers along one of the oldest roads in existence, a cosmic highway forged in the earliest moments of time. This ancient road had begun before Earth had oceans, before mountains rose, before life itself emerged. It was a road made not of cold stone or calculated design, but of pure memory, preserving the echoes of creation for all eternity. For a long time, the Zodiacal Light remained visible behind the Serenity. Even as the ship continued its gentle journey outward through the solar system, the great river of ancient dust lingered like a fading memory illuminated by sunlight. Gradually, however, another pattern began to reveal itself. Not a structure made of matter. Not a cloud. Not a ring. A pattern made of motion. The guide invited you to the highest observation deck shortly after the ship's artificial dawn. Unlike the panoramic dome below, this chamber was almost entirely transparent. Above. Below. Ahead. Behind. The stars surrounded you in every direction. The sensation was not unlike floating inside a crystal sphere suspended between worlds. At the center of the room hovered a projection table. No controls. No visible screens. Only a circular platform composed of dark polished stone. As you approached, faint points of light emerged above it. 1 point became 2. 2 became 10. Soon an entire miniature solar system floated silently before you. The sun glowed at its center. Mercury circled close by. Venus followed. Then Earth. Mars. The distant giants beyond. Each orbit appeared as a delicate silver thread woven through darkness. The guide rested a hand upon the edge of the platform. Most people imagine the solar system as a collection of planets. The tiny worlds continued their graceful dance. But it is more accurate to think of it as a collection of relationships. You watched Earth complete a tiny fraction of its orbit. Relationships? The guide nodded. Nothing travels alone. The words seemed simple. Yet the longer you observe the model,
the more profound they became.
Every planet responded to the sun. Every moon responded to its planet. Asteroids felt the influence of giant worlds. Comets wandered between gravitational kingdoms. Nothing existed independently.
Every object belonged to an invisible web of attraction stretching across billions of kilometers. The guide touched the projection. The planetary paths brightened. What you're seeing is one of the most beautiful achievements in nature.
Gravity? Balance. The guide smiled. Gravity provides the invitation. Motion provides the reply. You studied the elegant curves. Each orbit appeared effortless. No sharp turns. No hesitation.
Only continuous movement.
Continuous falling. Continuous balance. The guide continued. For thousands of years, humanity believed the heavens were chaotic.
Then we began paying closer attention.
The silver paths slowly rotated. The planets were not wandering randomly. They were following rules. Simple rules. Beautiful rules.
The guide looked toward the stars. And beauty often emerges when simple rules repeat for a very long time.
Outside the observation deck, reality mirrored the projection. Far beyond the hull, planets continued tracing their ancient routes around the sun.
Routes they had followed for billions of years.
Routes older than mountains. Older than oceans. Older than life itself. The guide expanded the model. The inner planets drifted outward. Their orbits became larger. More detailed. More alive. You noticed something remarkable. No paths crossed.
No collisions occurred. Despite sharing the same cosmic neighborhood, every world maintained its own graceful lane.
Its own rhythm. Its own timing. The guide noticed your expression. Order. You nodded. It feels impossible. The guide laughed softly. It only feels impossible because chaos receives more attention.
The miniature solar system continued turning.
News headlines rarely celebrate another successful sunrise. They report storms. They report accidents. They report disruptions. The guide pointed toward Earth's orbit. But this planet has completed more than 4 billion years of successful revolutions around the sun without missing one. The thought was astonishing. 4 billion years. Every orbit completed. Every season arriving. Every sunrise appearing precisely when it should. Not because anyone commanded it. Because the laws of nature remained faithful. The guide folded their hands. The universe is far more stable than people realize. You watched Jupiter move slowly through the projection. Its orbit immense compared to Earth's. Its pace leisurely. Patient. Majestic. Everything seems so calm. It is. The guide smiled. Most of the time. A slight gesture expanded the model again. This time, thousands of tiny points appeared between Mars and Jupiter. The asteroid belt. Countless fragments drifted through space. Yet even here, apparent disorder concealed deeper structure. The guide highlighted several invisible regions. You might expect this area to be completely random. It isn't. The asteroids clustered, separated, organized themselves into subtle patterns. The guide nodded toward the display. Gravity creates architecture. The phrase lingered. Architecture. Not buildings. Not walls. But invisible structures shaped entirely by attraction and motion. The guide highlighted Jupiter. The giant planet glowed softly. Its gravity influences objects millions of kilometers away. The asteroid distribution shifted. New patterns emerged. Some regions become stable. Others become unstable. Certain orbits survive. Others disappear. The guide smiled. The solar system has been editing itself for billions of years. Outside the ship, sunlight reflected from distant particles drifting through space. The projection slowly faded. Only a few key worlds remained illuminated. Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Their paths formed a graceful harmony of circles and ellipses. A silent choreography unfolding across unimaginable distances. You suddenly realized something. Nothing is forcing them. The guide looked pleased. Exactly. No engines. No steering systems. No corrections every hour. The guide nodded toward the planets. They simply obey their nature. The room fell quiet. A strange peace settled over you. For much of your life, movement had been associated with effort. Progress required struggle. Change required force. Yet here was an entire solar system functioning through balance rather than conflict. The guide seemed to sense the direction of your thoughts. There is wisdom hidden in celestial mechanics. You looked toward them. How so? The guide approached the transparent wall overlooking the stars. Many people spend years fighting every current in their lives. The stars reflected softly in their eyes. Some battles are necessary. The guide paused. But many difficulties arise because we are attempting to move against the geometry of our own existence. You considered the words carefully. The guide continued. A planet does not become stronger by resisting gravity. It becomes stable by finding balance with it. Silence followed. Outside, countless stars continued shining. Inside, the observation deck seemed suspended outside time itself. The guide eventually pointed toward a bright golden object visible through the hull. Jupiter. Though still distant, it had grown noticeably larger during recent days aboard the Serenity. A luminous beacon against the darkness. Our next destination. You watched the giant world. Even from here, its presence felt immense. Its gravity shaped the architecture of entire regions of the solar system. Its influence extended far beyond its visible boundaries. The guide smiled. But before we arrive, there is another lesson. The projection table awakened once more. This time, 2 points of light appeared. One orbited slowly around the other. Then a third joined them. The motion became more complicated. Less predictable. The paths twisted. Shifted. Changed. You frowned. The guide nodded knowingly. The three-body problem. A gentle laugh escaped them. One of the universe's favorite reminders. Reminders of what? The guide smiled. That perfection does not mean simplicity. The orbits danced chaotically. Beautiful. Complex. Uncertain. Yet still governed by the same laws as before. The same gravity. The same mathematics. The same universe. The guide allowed the display to fade. Order and unpredictability are not enemies. They are companions. You stood together in silence. Far below, the sun illuminated the ship's elegant hull. Far ahead, Jupiter continued waiting. Far behind, Earth completed another tiny fraction of its endless journey around the sun. Everything moved. Everything changed. Yet somehow everything remained connected. The guide looked toward the stars one final time. Long ago, sailors crossed oceans using constellations. Today we cross space using equations. A faint smile appeared. But both are ultimately acts of trust. The observation deck dimmed slightly as artificial evening approached aboard the Serenity. The stars seemed brighter now. Not because they had changed. Because you had. For the first time, the solar system no longer felt like a collection of isolated worlds scattered through emptiness. It felt like a single living structure. A masterpiece of geometry written in gravity and time. And somewhere ahead, beyond the ancient pathways of planets and dust, the great kingdom of the gas giants waited beneath the silent light of distant suns. Several days passed aboard the Serenity. Or perhaps weeks. Time had begun behaving differently. Not because clocks were inaccurate. The ship maintained perfect precision. Every second remained exactly 60 seconds long. Every hour remained exactly 60 minutes. Yet something inside you had changed. On Earth, time often felt divided into obligations. Meetings. Deadlines. Appointments. Notifications. A constant procession of moments demanding attention. Here, among the stars, time seemed less concerned with productivity. It unfolded naturally. Like sunlight moving across a mountain. Like waves reaching a shore. Like planets orbiting a star. The guide often said that the universe never hurries. Now, for the first time, you were beginning to understand. The observation dome had become your favorite place aboard the ship. Its transparent walls offered an uninterrupted view of the solar system unfolding around you. Each day revealed subtle changes. Earth continued shrinking behind you. Jupiter continued growing ahead. And between those two worlds lay a region long misunderstood by humanity. The asteroid belt. For generations, stories and films had portrayed it as a chaotic labyrinth. A crowded jungle of tumbling rocks packed so tightly together that spacecraft would need extraordinary skill merely to survive passage through it. Reality, as usual, proved far more elegant. The guide stood beside the observation rail. The guide often said, "The universe rarely resembles our fears." Ahead, scattered points of light drifted through the darkness. At first glance they appeared to be ordinary stars. But gradually, as the Serenity approached, some began to move. Slowly. gracefully, each following its own ancient orbit around the Sun. The guide activated a subtle enhancement within the observation dome.
Several objects brightened slightly. Tiny labels appeared: Vesta, Pallas, Hygeia, Ceres.
The names hovered briefly before fading.
The guide smiled, remarking, "The old survivors."
You watched one distant asteroid crossing against the background stars and asked, "How many are there?" The guide's answer arrived calmly: millions.
As large as mountains.
As small as pebbles. As fine as dust.
The guide folded their hands, adding, "Together, they preserve a chapter of solar system history that never became a planet."
The phrase caught your attention. You asked, "Never became a planet?" The guide nodded.
Billions of years ago, this region contained enough material to form another world.
You looked toward the drifting rocks and questioned, "What happened?" The guide pointed toward a bright star-like object far ahead.
Jupiter. Even from this distance, the giant planet commanded attention.
Its presence felt immense. Almost royal.
The guide then stated, "Jupiter happened." The guide smiled gently, explaining, "Its gravity became so powerful that it continuously stirred this region."
The guide traced an invisible circle through the air, saying, "Collisions occurred. Orbits shifted. Material scattered. The growing planet never allowed its smaller neighbors enough peace to unite."
You gazed toward the asteroid field, thinking, "A failed planet."
Or perhaps something else. The guide seemed to sense your thoughts, remarking, "Human beings often describe this region as incomplete." After a brief pause, the guide added, "I've never agreed." You turned toward them. The guide gestured toward the countless objects drifting through space, posing a question: must everything become something larger to possess value? The question lingered.
Outside, an asteroid rotated silently through sunlight.
Its surface glimmered briefly before returning to shadow. The guide continued, "Perhaps its purpose was never to become a planet. Perhaps its purpose was simply to exist." For several minutes, neither of you spoke.
The asteroid belt slowly unfolded around the ship.
Not crowded. Not dangerous. Not chaotic.
The distances between objects remained enormous. Many asteroids were separated by hundreds of thousands of kilometers.
The solar system possessed more empty space than most people could imagine.
Yet despite those vast separations, a sense of community remained.
Each object followed its own path. Its own rhythm. Its own story.
Together, they formed something greater than isolation.
A quiet civilization of stone. Ancient and enduring. The guide invited you to one of the forward observation chambers. Unlike the main dome, this room magnified distant objects using an advanced optical system. A large asteroid gradually filled the viewing window. Its shape was irregular. Weathered. Scarred by billions of years of impacts. Crater upon crater covered its surface. Mountains rose from its ancient crust. Shadows stretched across enormous valleys. The guide lowered their voice, saying, "Some of these scars are older than life on Earth." You stared. The asteroid drifted silently across the stars. Every crater represented a collision. Every ridge a memory. Every fracture a chapter. It had survived longer than any mountain on Earth. Longer than every civilization. Longer than every language. Longer than humanity itself. The guide continued, "Nothing here has remained untouched." The asteroid rotated slowly. Its battered surface reflected sunlight. The guide smiled gently, concluding, "And yet, it remains." The words resonated more deeply than expected. Perhaps because they applied to more than asteroids. Many lives carried scars. Many hearts did. Many memories. Many dreams. Yet survival itself possessed a kind of beauty. Outside, another object emerged from the darkness. Then another. And another. Not because the belt was crowded. Because your eyes had learned how to see. The guide often said that the universe rewarded patience. This was another example. At first glance, the asteroid belt appeared empty. Given time, it revealed astonishing richness, one world shaped like a potato, another almost spherical, some bright, others dark as coal. Each unique, each ancient, each quietly following the laws of gravity. The guide approached a display panel. A three-dimensional map appeared above it. Thousands of tiny points traced elegant paths around the sun. From a distance, the asteroid belt resembled a broad river encircling the inner solar system. Not disorder. Not confusion. But structure, geometry, and movement. The guide highlighted one region, explaining, "These are called Kirkwood gaps." Several empty lanes appeared within the distribution. You noticed the pattern immediately. Certain orbits lacked asteroids entirely. You asked, "What caused that?" The guide smiled and replied, "Music." You laughed softly. The guide nodded, elaborating, "In a way. When objects repeatedly encounter a gravitational rhythm, the effects accumulate." The guide enlarged Jupiter's orbit, explaining further, the giant planet glowed brighter. Certain orbital periods resonate with Jupiter. Over millions of years, those resonances clear specific pathways. The empty regions became easier to see, like gaps between notes, like pauses within a melody. The guide smiled, concluding, "The solar system is full of rhythms. Some build. Some remove. But all leave patterns behind." Outside, sunlight washed across a slowly rotating asteroid. Its shadow moved almost imperceptibly. A day upon that tiny world might last only a few hours, or several weeks. Every object kept its own time. The guide suddenly pointed toward the observation window, saying, "There." You followed their gaze. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then you saw it. A small asteroid drifting relatively near the ship. Not dangerously close. Simply close enough to appreciate its details. Its surface reflected gold from the distant sun. One side remained immersed in darkness. The boundary between light and shadow crossed its rocky terrain like the edge of a forgotten continent. For a few breathtaking moments, the Serenity matched its trajectory. The asteroid appeared almost motionless beside you. A traveler meeting another traveler. The guide watched quietly, then whispered, "Imagine. That rock has been orbiting the sun for billions of years." You stared. The asteroid seemed so small, so humble. Yet it had witnessed the birth of continents,
the rise and fall of species, the emergence of intelligence. All while silently following its path around a star. The guide smiled, saying, "Not every ancient thing announces its age." The asteroid slowly drifted away. Soon it became another point of light among countless others. Yet something about the encounter remained with you. A sense of perspective. A sense of continuity. The realization that the universe contains stories older than imagination. Stories written not in words, but in stone. As artificial evening settled across the Serenity, the observation dome dimmed slightly. The stars brightened. Jupiter burned ahead like a golden lantern. Larger now. Brighter now. Closer now. Its immense gravity already influenced the architecture of the asteroid belt surrounding you. Its kingdom lay waiting. The guide stood beside the window, watching the giant world grow. The guide then shared, "There is an old saying preserved in the archives of Epoch Echoes." You glanced toward them. The guide smiled softly, quoting, "The stars teach wonder." After a brief pause, the guide continued, "The planets teach scale." The giant beacon ahead glowed steadily. You asked, "And the asteroids?" The guide looked toward the countless ancient stones drifting through the darkness, then stated, "They teach endurance." Outside, millions of silent worlds continued their endless dance around the sun. Not rushing. Not competing. Not striving to become something else. Simply remaining what they had always been. Ancient witnesses turning through the ages. And ahead, beyond the river of stone and memory, the first of the great gas giants waited beneath the eternal light of the solar system's central star. The first sign that Jupiter was truly approaching was not its size. It was its presence. For many cycles aboard the Serenity, the giant planet had appeared as a brilliant object ahead, a golden beacon growing steadily brighter against the darkness. Yet there came a moment when it ceased to resemble a destination and began to resemble a world. A world unlike any other. You stood alone in the observation dome when the realization arrived. The stars beyond the forward windows seemed different. Not because they had changed. Because something enormous was beginning to occupy the space between them. At first it appeared only as a faint disk. Then a sphere. Then a world so vast that your mind struggled to comprehend its dimensions. The guide joined you quietly. Neither of you spoke. Some sights deserved a period of adjustment. Jupiter filled more of the heavens with every passing hour. Bands of cream, gold, amber, and rust stretched across its atmosphere. Delicate storms curled through those layers like brushstrokes painted upon liquid silk. Cloud systems larger than entire continents drifted across its face. The planet rotated slowly before your eyes. Alive. Restless. Majestic. And utterly silent. The guide finally spoke. When Galileo first observed Jupiter through a telescope in 1610, he changed the history of astronomy. You kept your eyes on the giant world. Because of the moons? The guide smiled. Exactly. Galileo had noticed tiny points of light accompanying Jupiter. At first he assumed they were stars. Then he realized they were moving. Night after night, they changed positions. Sometimes disappearing. Sometimes reappearing. Eventually the truth became undeniable. Objects were orbiting Jupiter,
not Earth. A simple observation.
A revolutionary consequence. The universe was larger than humanity's assumptions.
The guide looked toward the approaching planet.
Since then, countless people have gazed at Jupiter.
A brief pause. Yet very few have seen it like this. You understood immediately. Photographs revealed details.
Telescopes revealed structure.
But neither conveyed presence. Jupiter did not merely occupy space. It dominated it. The planet's immense gravity could be felt intellectually even before it could be measured. Its influence stretched across hundreds of millions of kilometers. It shaped asteroid orbits, captured comets, guided entire regions of the solar system.
A king whose authority extended far beyond visible borders.
The guide activated a scale projection beside the window. Earth appeared. Tiny. Almost insignificant. Then Jupiter appeared beside it. You stared.
The comparison felt absurd.
Over 11 Earths could fit side by side across Jupiter's diameter.
More than 1,300 Earths could fit inside its volume.
If Earth were the size of a grape, Jupiter would resemble a basketball. The guide noticed your expression. Scale is difficult. Very. The guide nodded. Our brains evolved to understand forests, mountains, rivers, not planets. The projection vanished. Reality remained. And reality was even more astonishing. Jupiter continued expanding before the ship. Its cloud bands revealed increasing detail. Bright zones alternated with darker belts. Massive storms twisted through the atmosphere. Some larger than continents. Some older than nations. The guide folded their hands behind their back. There is another reason Jupiter fascinates astronomers. What is it? It almost became a star. You turned toward them. The guide smiled gently. Not quite. But almost. The words lingered. Jupiter contained more than twice the mass of all other planets combined. During the formation of the solar system, it gathered extraordinary quantities of hydrogen and helium. Had it accumulated far more material? Perhaps 75 times its current mass. Nuclear fusion might have ignited within its core. A second sun. A binary star system. An entirely different solar system. The guide looked toward the giant world. But it stopped growing. You watched the planet turning silently. So it failed? The guide laughed softly. The answer arrived immediately. No. The guide's eyes reflected Jupiter's golden light. Not becoming something else is not failure. The words reminded you of the asteroid belt. Perhaps the universe had been teaching the same lesson all along. The guide continued. Jupiter became exactly what it needed to become. The giant world filled nearly half the forward sky now. Clouds moved through its atmosphere in immense rivers. Wind speeds reached hundreds of kilometers per hour. Lightning storms erupted beneath towering cloud layers. Ammonia crystals formed high above. Deeper still, hydrogen compressed beneath unimaginable pressures. And yet, no solid surface existed. No coastline. No continent. No mountain. No shore. The realization felt strangely unsettling. Where does the planet begin? The guide smiled. A famous question.
They pointed toward the visible atmosphere.
The answer depends upon what you mean by begin.
The cloud tops visible from space represented only the uppermost layers.
Beneath them stretched thousands of kilometers of increasingly dense atmosphere. Gas gradually became liquid-like.
Liquid-like hydrogen became metallic hydrogen.
Pressure rose. Temperature rose.
The distinction between sky and ocean eventually disappeared.
The guide lowered their voice.
Jupiter is a world without a clear boundary.
You stared. A planet with no surface. No place to stand. No place to arrive. Only depth. Layer after layer after layer. A seemingly endless descent into pressure and darkness. The guide continued.
Nature rarely draws sharp lines.
Remember the atmosphere? You nodded.
Earth's air had gradually become space.
No sudden border. Only transition. Jupiter follows the same philosophy. The guide smiled. The deeper you go, the less certain your definitions become.
Outside, a massive storm drifted across the planet's northern hemisphere. Its swirling clouds stretched wider than Earth itself. Sunlight illuminated its upper layers with soft gold.
Shadowed regions glowed copper and amber. The entire atmosphere resembled a living painting. Constantly changing. Never repeating itself. The guide looked thoughtful. Humans often seek permanence. The giant planet rotated silently before you. Yet some of the most beautiful things in the universe exist because they are constantly changing. Clouds. Waves. Fire. Weather. Thoughts. The storm below shifted shape almost imperceptibly. A masterpiece continuously rewriting itself.
A gentle tone resonated throughout the ship.
Entering Jovian influence region. The calm onboard voice paused. Primary observations commencing. The guide smiled. We've arrived. Not at Jupiter. Within Jupiter. You frowned. The guide laughed. Not physically. Gravitationally. A projection appeared nearby. It showed invisible contours extending around the giant planet. Huge regions of influence. An empire written in gravity rather than stone.
Jupiter's reach extended astonishing distances into space.
Objects millions of kilometers away still responded to its pull. The guide pointed toward the display. Every massive object creates a kind of kingdom. Earth has one. The moon has one. The sun has one.
The guide gestured toward Jupiter.
This one is simply larger. The projection faded. Outside, tiny points of light emerged around the giant planet. Moons. At first they resembled stars. Then their movement became apparent. For bright companions. Io. Europa. Ganymede. Callisto. The famous Galilean moons. Each a world. Each with its own story. Each orbiting a master more than twice as massive as every other planet combined. The guide watched them quietly. Imagine. You followed the movement of the moons. What? The guide smiled. There are oceans beneath Europa. More water than all of Earth's oceans combined. The thought was staggering. A frozen moon. An invisible sea. Perhaps entire ecosystems hidden beneath kilometers of ice. Possibilities waiting in darkness. The guide continued. Ganymede possesses its own magnetic field. Callisto preserves ancient scars from the solar system's youth. Io erupts with volcanic fury unmatched anywhere else. The four moons continued their graceful dance. A miniature solar system surrounding a giant world. Galileo had seen them centuries ago. Now you watched them with your own eyes. The same motion. The same geometry. The same universe. As artificial night settled aboard the Serenity, the lights within the observation dome dimmed further. Jupiter glowed ahead like a second sunrise. The giant world occupied so much of the sky that it seemed impossible anything could be larger. And yet the guide remained calm. As though this immense planet represented only another chapter. Another lesson. Another doorway. The guide stood beside the window for a long time before speaking again. When ancient sailors crossed oceans, they feared reaching the edge of the world. You look toward the endless atmosphere below. There is no edge here. No. The guide smiled. Only depth. Outside, Jupiter continued turning. Clouds drifted. Storms evolved. Moons orbited. Gravity shaped invisible pathways through space. A giant without a shore. A kingdom without walls. A world that taught a simple truth: some realities are too vast to be conquered. They can only be witnessed. And as the Serenity glided deeper into the realm of Jupiter, the immense atmosphere below seemed to breathe beneath the sunlight, waiting to reveal still greater wonders hidden among its storms and moons. For many cycles, Jupiter remained behind you. Not forgotten. Never forgotten. But gradually receding into the vast architecture of the solar system. Its immense gravity continued shaping the invisible pathways of countless worlds, yet the Serenity now followed another road. A road leading toward one of the most recognizable wonders ever observed beneath the heavens. Saturn. Long before telescopes became powerful. Long before spacecraft crossed the darkness between planets. Long before humanity understood what rings truly were. People had already sensed that Saturn was special. Perhaps because beauty often announces itself before understanding arrives. The first glimpse came during artificial dawn. You entered the observation dome expecting stars. Instead, you found silence. Not because the room was empty. Because every traveler aboard the ship, including the guide, was standing motionless before the forward windows. No one spoke. No one needed to. Ahead floated a pale golden world surrounded by an impossibly thin band of light. At first glance, it seemed unreal. As though some celestial artist had sketched a planet and then drawn a luminous circle around it simply because the composition felt incomplete without one. The guide finally broke the silence. Every photograph you've ever seen. A pause has been an understatement. You understood immediately. Saturn was beautiful. Not dramatically beautiful. Not overwhelmingly beautiful. Its beauty possessed balance, harmony, restraint.
The planet itself glowed softly in shades of gold, cream, ivory, and pale amber. The rings stretched outward in perfect elegance. Thin enough to seem fragile.
Large enough to dwarf entire planets. Sunlight reflected from billions upon billions of icy particles, transforming the structure into a vast luminous disk suspended in darkness. The guide stepped closer to the window.
There are moments when science and poetry stop arguing.
The rings shimmered. This is one of them. You stood quietly, watching, breathing,
trying and failing to fully comprehend the scale before you. The rings appeared delicate,
almost weightless. Yet they extended hundreds of thousands of kilometers across space.
If placed around Earth, they would stretch far beyond the Moon's orbit.
And still, their thickness in many regions measured less than the height of a mountain. An object wider than imagination. Thinner than intuition. The guide smiled. The universe enjoys impossible proportions. As the Serenity approached, details emerged. The rings were not solid structures. Not giant disks. Not cosmic plates circling the planet.
Instead, they resembled rivers.
Countless rivers flowing beside one another. Bands of light. Bands of shadow. Bright regions. Dark divisions.
Intricate textures woven throughout the entire system.
The guide activated a subtle magnification.
The view sharpened. And suddenly the truth became visible. The rings were alive with motion.
Not biological life. A different kind. Every point of light represented ice. Rock. Dust. Fragments. Particles. Some no larger than snowflakes. Others as large as buildings. Each orbiting Saturn independently. Each following the laws of gravity. Together creating one of the most beautiful structures in the solar system. The guide folded their hands. A common misconception. You glanced toward them. People imagine the rings are solid because they appear solid from afar. The guide pointed toward the observation window. Distance creates simplicity. The countless particles glimmered. But reality often contains more detail than our eyes can resolve.
You watched sunlight scatter through the icy material.
Tiny flashes appeared everywhere.
Millions of miniature reflections. Like stars born within stars.
The guide continued. Every ring particle is following its own orbit. No conductor. No central command. No instructions. Yet together. The guide smiled. They create harmony.
The thought felt familiar. You had seen the same principle among the planets.
Among the asteroids. Among the structures of gravity itself.
The universe seemed fond of cooperation emerging naturally from simple rules.
Ahead, Saturn slowly rotated. Cloud bands drifted across its atmosphere.
Storms curl through its upper layers. Yet the rings remained the true focus.
The eye returned to them again and again,
as though they possessed their own gravity.
The guide looked toward the planet. Would you like to know something strange? You nodded. Saturn is less dense than water. You blinked. What?
The guide laughed softly.
It's true. The giant planet contained enormous mass, but it occupied even greater volume.
Its average density remained lower than liquid water.
The guide smiled. If there were an ocean large enough.
The pause felt deliberate.
Saturn would float. You laughed.
The image was absurd.
A planet nearly 10 times Earth's diameter floating like a golden lantern upon an impossible sea. The guide seemed pleased. The universe occasionally rewards curiosity with absurdity.
Outside, the rings continued expanding across the heavens. Soon they occupied so much of the observation window that they resembled a luminous horizon suspended in space. You could now distinguish individual divisions between major ring groups.
Broad gaps. Narrow separations. Intricate structures stretching across enormous distances. The guide pointed toward one prominent dark region. The Cassini division. The name appeared briefly within the observation display.
A broad gap separating major ring systems.
What caused it? The guide smiled. Music. You laughed again. That's the second time you've said that. Because it's the second time it's true. The guide expanded a projection. Saturn appeared at the center.
Several moons orbited nearby. One in particular glowed softly.
Mimas.
The guide highlighted its path.
Orbital resonance.
The familiar phrase returned.
A gravitational rhythm. A repeating pattern. A cosmic beat. The guide traced the relationship between moon and ring particles. Certain orbits became unstable. Over immense spans of time, those regions emptied. The gap emerged. Not through violence. Not through collision. Through rhythm. The guide lowered their voice.
Nature often sculpts through repetition.
The words lingered. A river shapes stone. Wind shapes dunes. Gravity shapes rings. Small influences repeated patiently over long enough periods become architects. As the Serenity continued inward, another extraordinary feature appeared. A shadow. At first, you assumed it belonged to the planet. Then you realized the truth.
The rings themselves were casting darkness upon Saturn.
A thin gray arc stretched across the atmosphere. Elegant. Precise. Beautiful. The guide watched your reaction. Light creates shadow.
The giant world rotated beneath its ringed crown.
Even beauty does. You studied the dark line.
Without the rings, the shadow would not exist. Yet the shadow somehow made the rings more beautiful.
Not despite the darkness. Because of it. The guide seemed to sense the thought. Contrast reveals form. Silence followed.
Outside, billions of ice particles continued their endless journey around Saturn. Some had orbited for millions of years.
Others perhaps since the formation of the solar system itself.
No one knew exactly how long the rings would survive.
Gravity slowly altered them. Material gradually drifted.
The structure evolved continuously. Nothing remained unchanged forever.
The guide eventually spoke. Another misconception. You looked toward them. People often think permanence gives things value. The rings shimmered. What if impermanence does? You watched the icy bands. Someday they might disappear. Not tomorrow. Not soon. But eventually. The realization did not reduce their beauty. It amplified it. The guide nodded. Exactly. Far ahead, the rings widened further. The observation dome gradually adjusted magnification. Details multiplied. Subtle textures became visible. Braided structures. Faint wave patterns. Regions sculpted by unseen moons. The closer you looked,
the more complexity emerged.
The guide smiled softly.
There is an old saying preserved within the archives of Epoch Echoes.
The rings reflected golden sunlight through the transparent hull. What does it say? The guide looked toward the luminous bands surrounding Saturn.
The universe rewards patience with layers.
A brief pause.
What first appears beautiful often becomes extraordinary when observed longer.
You continued watching. And understood.
The rings had seemed magnificent from a distance.
Now they felt almost alive with detail.
Every closer look revealed another hidden structure.
Another subtle pattern. Another story written in gravity and ice.
Outside, the immense ring system stretched across space like a frozen symphony.
Billions of particles. Billions of paths. Billions of reflections.
Together forming something so delicate that it seemed impossible.
And yet there it was. A masterpiece composed not of certainty, but of motion. Not of solidity, but of relationship.
As the Serenity glided toward the brilliant rings, sunlight scattered through countless fragments of ancient ice, transforming the darkness around Saturn into a cathedral of silver light. And somewhere within that luminous architecture, deeper lessons still waited among the shadows and the stars.
The first shadow appeared long before you entered it. At first it was merely an absence.
A subtle darkening among the brilliant architecture of Saturn's rings.
A region where sunlight seemed hesitant to travel.
A place where brightness surrendered itself to something older.
Something quieter. Something profound. The guide stood beside the forward observation window. For several minutes, neither of you spoke. The rings dominated the heavens now. They no longer resembled a distant wonder. They had become a landscape. A horizon. An environment.
Towering arcs of ice stretched above and below the ship, reflecting sunlight into shimmering rivers of silver and gold.
Every particle seemed alive with motion. Every fragment carried its own glimmer.
Its own brief conversation with the sun.
Ahead waited darkness. Not complete darkness. Not emptiness. A shadow. The guide finally spoke.
We spend most of our lives chasing light. You continued watching the approaching region. The rings behind it blazed with brilliance. The contrast was striking.
But,
the guide smiled softly.
But sometimes peace lives elsewhere. The shadow expanded. Gradually. Patiently. As though it had all the time in the universe. Perhaps it did.
You looked towards Saturn itself.
The answer became clear.
The giant planet stood between the Sun and portions of its ring system. Its enormous bulk intercepted the sunlight. Beyond that invisible line, billions of icy particles drifted through darkness.
Still present. Still moving. Still beautiful. Simply unseen.
The guide folded their hands. Most shadows are not places. The guide's eyes reflected the distant rings.
They are relationships. The thought lingered. Without light. No shadow. Without an object. No shadow. Without perspective. No shadow.
The darkness existed because of connection.
Not separation. The guide continued. The universe rarely creates anything in isolation.
Ahead, the Serenity maintained its graceful course. The ship was approaching one of the largest shadows in the solar system. A vast region cast by Saturn itself.
A darkness stretching across hundreds of thousands of kilometers.
You felt no fear.
Only curiosity. The guide seemed pleased. Good. You glanced toward them. Good. Many people fear darkness because they assume it hides something. The guide smiled. Sometimes darkness is simply where light has not arrived yet.
Outside, the brilliant glow of the rings continued fading.
Silver became gray. Gray became charcoal. The luminous reflections weakened. Not suddenly. Gradually. The way evening arrives on Earth. The way twilight softens a landscape before night. Nothing dramatic. Only transition.
The guide watched the changing scene. Nature prefers gradients.
Again, the familiar lesson. The atmosphere had not ended abruptly.
Space had not begun abruptly.
Even sunlight yielded gently. The shadow approached like a tide. The observation dome automatically adjusted its sensitivity.
Stars emerged. Then more stars.
Then thousands. Without reflected sunlight overwhelming the view, the deeper universe revealed itself.
The Milky Way blossomed across the darkness. Dense star clouds stretched from horizon to horizon.
Nebulae glowed faintly in the distance. Clusters sparkled like scattered diamonds. The guide smiled.
One light fades. The stars brighten further. And another becomes visible. You stared. The view was breathtaking. The rings had been magnificent. Yet their brilliance had hidden part of the universe beyond them.
Now, within the growing darkness, those hidden wonders emerged. A realization quietly settled within you. Sometimes seeing more requires less light. The guide nodded. As though hearing the thought. Exactly.
The ship crossed the boundary moments later.
No alarm sounded. No visible line appeared. Yet everyone aboard felt it. Sunlight vanished. Not completely.
Distant starlight remained. The faint glow of Saturn remained. The rings still shimmered weakly around the horizon.
But direct sunlight disappeared.
And with it came a remarkable transformation.
The darkness felt protective, not threatening, not lonely. Protective. Like standing beneath a vast canopy during gentle rain.
Like resting beneath a tree while the afternoon sun burns beyond its leaves.
Like closing your eyes during meditation. The guide lowered their voice. Welcome. You waited. To Saturn's shadow.
The words seemed almost ceremonial. Perhaps they were.
For countless kilometers in every direction, the giant planet shielded this region from the sun.
A kingdom of twilight suspended within the solar system.
The guide moved closer to the observation glass. Do you know something strange? You shook your head. Most of the universe resembles this.
The darkness stretched endlessly beyond the rings.
Space is not filled with sunlight. The guide smiled gently.
Most places exist far from stars.
The realization was profound.
Humanity evolved beneath a bright Sunday warm skies.
Blue days. Golden mornings. Yet those experiences represented only a tiny fraction of reality. The cosmos itself was largely dark. And somehow, that darkness felt peaceful. The guide seemed unsurprised. The absence of stimulation allows other things to emerge.
Outside, stars multiplied further. You began noticing subtle colors.
Blue giants. Orange suns. Red dwarfs. Some stars glowed faintly green due to optical effects within human vision. Others shone with pure white brilliance. Each point of light represented another sun. Another system. Another possibility. The guide looked toward a particularly bright star. Every one of them exists within darkness. The stars continued burning. And none are diminished by it. Silence followed. Not an empty silence. A nourishing one. The kind that allows thoughts to settle. Memories to breathe. Worries to loosen their grip. The guide eventually spoke again.
Human beings often treat silence as a problem to solve.
You listened. We fill every quiet moment. Music. Conversation. Notifications. Distractions. The guide watched the stars. As though silence itself were unfinished. Outside, Saturn's rings drifted through shadow. Ancient ice particles continued orbiting. Invisible to one another. Yet perfectly synchronized. The guide smiled. The universe disagrees. The words lingered. You thought of how rarely true quiet existed on Earth. Even peaceful places contain distant sounds. Traffic. Machines. Voices. Wind. Here, surrounded by vacuum and starlight, silence felt almost physical. A presence rather than an absence. The guide reached into their coat pocket and removed a small object. An antique device. Not technological. Mechanical. A pocket watch. Its silver surface reflected faint starlight. The guide opened it. Inside, a simple clock face ticked steadily. You hear that? You listened. Tick. 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 Barely audible. Yet unmistakable. The guide nodded. Inside this shadow. The tiny sound continued. Even a watch becomes a conversation. The idea made you smile. The darkness had not removed awareness. It had refined it. Small things became noticeable. Small details became meaningful. The guide closed the watch. The sound vanished. The silence returned. Gentle. Vast. Welcoming. Far beyond the observation dome, Saturn floated like a colossal crescent carved from golden shadow. Its atmosphere glowed faintly where sunlight still touched it. Its rings stretched into darkness. A masterpiece divided between illumination and night. The guide stood beside you for a long time before speaking again. There is a transmission preserved within the oldest collections of Epoch Echoes. You turned toward them. The guide's voice became almost a whisper. It was recorded by a traveler who crossed the same shadow many years ago. What did they say? The guide looked toward the stars. I spent my life searching for brighter places. A pause. The stars shimmered. Then I discovered that peace was waiting in the dark. Silence followed. No explanation necessary. Outside, the eternal shadow embraced the rings. The stars. The ship. And for the first time, you fully understood why darkness had inspired both fear and wonder throughout human history. Fear, because it concealed. Wonder, because it revealed. The shadow continued stretching before you. A vast corridor of quiet woven through the solar system. And as the Serenity drifted deeper into that velvet darkness, the stars seemed to draw closer, as though the universe itself were leaning in to share secrets spoken only when the light grows still. The shadow did not last forever. Nothing in the universe truly did. Not storms, not civilizations, not stars, not even darkness. For many hours, the Serenity sailed through Saturn's immense twilight kingdom, wrapped in silence so complete that the stars seemed brighter than memory itself. Then, gradually, light returned. At first it appeared as a faint silvered glow upon the distant horizon. A whisper of illumination. A promise. The guide noticed it before you did. Watch carefully. You turned toward the observation dome. The edge of Saturn's shadow stretched before the ship like the shoreline of an invisible sea. Beyond it waited sunlight. Patiently, the transition unfolded slowly. One moment the rings existed primarily as silhouettes against the stars. The next, tiny sparks began appearing throughout their immense structure. 1. Ice caught sunlight. Sunlight became silver fire. And suddenly the darkness was filled with light again. You found yourself speechless. The guide smiled. It happens every time. The rings now blazed with astonishing brilliance. Not because they had changed. Because the angle of light had.
The particles composing Saturn's rings were mostly water ice.
Ancient. Pristine. Some nearly pure.
Others mixed with traces of dust and rock.
Together they reflected sunlight with extraordinary efficiency.
The result resembled a frozen ocean made of stars.
The guide lowered their voice. People often imagine ice as cold. The rings shimmered. But they rarely imagine it as luminous.
Outside, countless fragments reflected sunlight in every direction.
Some particles were no larger than snowflakes. Others rivaled skyscrapers. Yet all contributed to the spectacle. Each fragment caught a tiny portion of the sun. The guide looked toward the glittering expanse. Listen. You frown slightly. There isn't any sound. The guide smiled. Not with your ears.
The rings stretched across the heavens.
A frozen orchestra of motion. Billions of particles. Billions of paths. Billions of tiny reflections. Together creating harmony.
The phrase felt perfect.
Not because the rings produced actual music. Because they embodied its structure. Rhythm. Pattern. Repetition.
The longer you observed, the more details emerged.
Tiny waves rippled through portions of the rings. Subtle spirals twisted among brighter regions.
Delicate textures appeared where moonlight shaped the surrounding material.
Nothing remained static. The guide activated a magnification display. A section of ring material expanded before you.
For the first time, individual objects became visible.
Countless fragments drifted together.
Yet they rarely collided.
You laughed softly. That sounds stressful. It is. The guide nodded. Now imagine every vehicle moving perfectly. No accidents. No traffic jams.
The guide pointed toward a narrow gap within the rings.
A tiny moon appeared nearby. Almost invisible. Yet clearly influencing the surrounding material. The guide smiled. A shepherd. The tiny object continued orbiting. Its gravity sculpted nearby particles. Maintaining structure. Maintaining boundaries. Maintaining form. The guide explained further. Small influences can create enormous effects.
The lesson felt familiar. The universe had been repeating it for chapters now.
Small things mattered.
Often more than expected.
The guide seemed pleased you noticed. Nature enjoys consistency. The guide leaned against the observation rail. Do you know how old these rings are? You considered the question. Billions of years? The guide smiled. The frozen choir sang on.
And beyond its silver cathedral, beyond Saturn's golden horizon, beyond the kingdom of rings and shadow, another ocean waited.
A darker ocean. And somewhere far ahead, hidden among those immense distances, a new heartbeat was already pulsing through the darkness, steady, ancient, and impossible. The day Saturn finally disappeared was not dramatic.
There was no ceremony, no farewell transmission, and no final announcement from the ship. The great ringed planet simply grew smaller and smaller until it became merely another bright point among countless others, a memory wrapped in sunlight.
The guide stood nearby.
Neither of you felt compelled to speak, for some departures deserved silence more than words.
Eventually, the guide smiled and said, "Most journeys begin with excitement." You glanced toward them and asked, "An end?"
The guide looked toward the stars, saying, "The meaningful ones rarely end." Outside, the solar system unfolded into a new form. The crowded architecture of planets gradually gave way to vast distances, and the spaces between things became larger, the silences deeper. Ahead lay no giant world, only space itself, the ancient ocean between familiar shores.
And yet, strangely, you felt no disappointment. The absence of spectacle revealed a different kind of beauty, a quieter beauty that required patience. The guide often compared astronomy to meditation, and you were beginning to understand why. The observation dome remained almost empty that cycle.
Many travelers preferred sleeping through the long passages, but you found yourself drawn repeatedly to the stars. The longer you looked, the more they seemed alive, not physically, but present, each occupying its own place within the vast tapestry.
The guide approached carrying 2 cups of tea.
The ritual had become familiar, comforting, and almost sacred. You accepted the cup, its warmth contrasting beautifully with the cold universe outside.
You asked, "How far are we from Earth now?" The guide replied, "Far enough that sunlight needs many hours to return."
You stared into the darkness, finding the answer both precise and meaningless. Distances in the outer solar system challenged intuition, kilometers became useless, and even millions of kilometers felt small.
The guide noticed your expression and noted that astronomers had eventually invented a different unit, astronomical units. The guide smiled and explained, 1 AU is the average distance between Earth and the Sun. We have traveled many of them. Outside, the Sun no longer dominated the heavens.
That realization surprised you more than anything else. It remained the brightest object, but it had changed. Near Earth, the Sun felt overwhelming and absolute. Out here, it resembled a brilliant star, still powerful, still beautiful, yet no longer all-consuming.
The guide followed your gaze and asked, "Interesting, isn't it?"
When you asked what, the guide said, "The closer we are to something, the larger it seems." The answer sounded obvious, yet the guide continued, "Not only stars.
People, problems, fears, regrets all seemed enormous when viewed from nearby. Distance altered perception. Perspective is one of the universe's oldest gifts.
Outside, the sunlight had become softer, more delicate, and the darkness between objects seemed wider.
The guide activated a projection within the observation dome. A translucent sphere appeared around the ship. At its center glowed the sun.
The sphere expanded again and again until it occupied the entire chamber. When you asked what it was, the guide's eyes brightened and replied, "The heliosphere." The glowing bubble stretched outward in all directions, enormous and almost inconceivably so.
The guide pointed toward the sun and said, "Our star is constantly breathing." You smiled, feeling it sounded less like astronomy and more like poetry.
The guide laughed softly, adding, "It only sounds poetic because reality often is." The sun emitted a continuous stream of charged particles, the solar wind. A river of energy flowing outward through space, not visible to human eyes, yet profoundly real. For billions of years, the solar wind had expanded into the surrounding galaxy, pushing outward, creating a protective bubble around the solar system. A vast sphere of influence extending far beyond the planets, beyond Saturn, beyond Neptune, beyond nearly everything humanity traditionally associated with home. The guide lowered their voice and said, "We are traveling inside it right now."
You studied the glowing model, feeling the realization was unexpectedly emotional.
Even here, this far from Earth, you remained inside something created by your star.
The guide seemed to understand, adding, "Home extends farther than most people think."
Outside, the stars drifted silently beyond the hull, while the projection slowly rotated, its outer boundaries shimmering faintly in the dim observation room. There, the guide pointed toward the distant edge, a region where the solar wind weakened and the pressure of the galaxy began pushing back.
The boundary remained unimaginably far away, yet it was now your destination. The Heliopause.
The word echoed softly, ancient and scientific at the same time. The guide smiled, the shoreline of the sun.
You stared, for the image was perfect.
For billions of years, the solar wind had flowed outward like a cosmic sea, eventually encountering the interstellar medium, the vast environment between stars. Where the two met, a frontier emerged, a border made not of walls, but of balance. The guide folded their hands. Most boundaries are not barriers.
They are conversations. The thought remained with you. Earth's atmosphere conversed with space, oceans with shorelines, light with darkness.
Perhaps all meaningful boundaries were exchanges rather than separations. Outside, the darkness deepened further as the ship glided onward. Hours passed, or perhaps longer.
Time aboard the ship had become fluid, merely softened.
The guide eventually returned carrying an old navigation chart, not digital, but paper, with edges showing signs of age.
You looked at it curiously, and when you asked where it came from, the guide replied, "The archives." The chart displayed the paths of humanity's earliest deep space probes, tiny lines stretching outward from the Sun. Voyager 1, Voyager 2.
Ancient travelers, still moving, still journeying long after the civilization that launched them had changed beyond recognition. The guide touched one of the trajectories. Voyager 1 crossed the Heliopause in 2012, the guide noted. You looked closer and exclaimed, "More than a century ago."
Yes, the guide's voice softened, and it is still traveling.
The thought felt extraordinary, a machine built by human hands crossing distances so immense that generations passed before its journey reached certain milestones. Some journeys require patience, the guide smiled. Outside, the stars continued shining and the ship glided onward, deeper, farther, quieter. The familiar architecture of planets had largely vanished now, no giant worlds filled the sky, no rings glittered nearby. Only distant sunlight and endless stars remained.
The guide stood beside the observation window, saying, "The next stage will feel different."
You listened as the guide continued, "The solar system will begin to disappear." The words carried no sadness, only truth. The farther you traveled, the less dominant the sun became and the more apparent the galaxy became. Human perspective would continue widening, home would continue expanding, until eventually, home might include the stars themselves. The guide remained silent for a long while before speaking once more. There is an old recording preserved within the archives of Epoch Echoes. You smiled, another transmission, another voice carried across time. The guide nodded, it was made by a traveler crossing the outer reaches of the Heliosphere. As the stars shimmered beyond the glass, you asked what they said.
The guide looked toward the distant sun.
The guide quoted, "The farther I traveled from home, there was a pause as the sunlight gleamed faintly against the ship's hull, the larger home became."
Silence followed, a peaceful silence.
Outside, the heliosphere stretched invisibly around you, an enormous bubble carved into the galaxy by the breath of a single star.
Ahead waited its distant shoreline.
Beyond that shoreline waited the ocean between stars. And somewhere within that ocean, unseen but steadily approaching, a rhythmic beacon pulsed through the darkness. A lighthouse older than nations, older than history. A heartbeat waiting to be heard. The day Saturn finally disappeared was not dramatic. There was no ceremony, no farewell transmission, and no final announcement from the ship. The great ringed planet simply grew smaller and smaller until it became merely another bright point among countless others, a memory wrapped in sunlight. The guide stood nearby. Neither of you felt compelled to speak, for some departures deserved silence more than words. Eventually, the guide smiled and said, "Most journeys begin with excitement." You glanced toward them and asked, "An end?" The guide looked toward the stars, saying, "The meaningful ones rarely end." Outside, the solar system unfolded into a new form. The crowded architecture of planets gradually gave way to vast distances, and the spaces between things became larger, the silences deeper. Ahead lay no giant world, only space itself, the ancient ocean between familiar shores. And yet, strangely, you felt no disappointment. The absence of spectacle revealed a different kind of beauty, a quieter beauty that required patience. The guide often compared astronomy to meditation, and you were beginning to understand why. The observation dome remained almost empty that cycle. Many travelers preferred sleeping through the long passages, but you found yourself drawn repeatedly to the stars. The longer you looked, the more they seemed alive, not physically, but present, each occupying its own place within the vast tapestry. The guide approached carrying 2 cups of tea. The ritual had become familiar, comforting, and almost sacred. You accepted the cup, its warmth contrasting beautifully with the cold universe outside. You asked, "How far are we from Earth now?" The guide replied, "Far enough that sunlight needs many hours to return." You stared into the darkness, finding the answer both precise and meaningless. Distances in the outer solar system challenged intuition, kilometers became useless, and even millions of kilometers felt small. The guide noticed your expression and noted that astronomers had eventually invented a different unit, astronomical units. The guide smiled and explained, 1 AU is the average distance between Earth and the Sun. We have traveled many of them. Outside, the Sun no longer dominated the heavens. That realization surprised you more than anything else. It remained the brightest object, but it had changed. Near Earth, the Sun felt overwhelming and absolute. Out here, it resembled a brilliant star, still powerful, still beautiful, yet no longer all-consuming. The guide followed your gaze and asked, "Interesting, isn't it?" When you asked what, the guide said, "The closer we are to something, the larger it seems." The answer sounded obvious, yet the guide continued, "Not only stars. People, problems, fears, regrets all seemed enormous when viewed from nearby. Distance altered perception. Perspective is one of the universe's oldest gifts." Outside, the sunlight had become softer, more delicate, and the darkness between objects seemed wider. The guide activated a projection within the observation dome. A translucent sphere appeared around the ship. At its center glowed the sun. The sphere expanded again and again until it occupied the entire chamber. When you asked what it was, the guide's eyes brightened and replied, "The heliosphere." The glowing bubble stretched outward in all directions, enormous and almost inconceivably so. The guide pointed toward the sun and said, "Our star is constantly breathing." You smiled, feeling it sounded less like astronomy and more like poetry. The guide laughed softly, adding, "It only sounds poetic because reality often is." The sun emitted a continuous stream of charged particles, the solar wind. A river of energy flowing outward through space, not visible to human eyes, yet profoundly real. For billions of years, the solar wind had expanded into the surrounding galaxy, pushing outward, creating a protective bubble around the solar system. A vast sphere of influence extending far beyond the planets, beyond Saturn, beyond Neptune, beyond nearly everything humanity traditionally associated with home. The guide lowered their voice and said, "We are traveling inside it right now." You studied the glowing model, feeling the realization was unexpectedly emotional. Even here, this far from Earth, you remained inside something created by your star. The guide seemed to understand, adding, "Home extends farther than most people think." Outside, the stars drifted silently beyond the hull, while the projection slowly rotated, its outer boundaries shimmering faintly in the dim observation room. There, the guide pointed toward the distant edge, a region where the solar wind weakened and the pressure of the galaxy began pushing back. The boundary remained unimaginably far away, yet it was now your destination. The Heliopause. The word echoed softly, ancient and scientific at the same time. The guide smiled, the shoreline of the sun. You stared, for the image was perfect. For billions of years, the solar wind had flowed outward like a cosmic sea, eventually encountering the interstellar medium, the vast environment between stars. Where the two met, a frontier emerged, a border made not of walls, but of balance. The guide folded their hands. Most boundaries are not barriers. They are conversations. The thought remained with you. Earth's atmosphere conversed with space, oceans with shorelines, light with darkness. Perhaps all meaningful boundaries were exchanges rather than separations. Outside, the darkness deepened further as the ship glided onward. Hours passed, or perhaps longer. Time aboard the ship had become fluid, merely softened. The guide eventually returned carrying an old navigation chart, not digital, but paper, with edges showing signs of age. You looked at it curiously, and when you asked where it came from, the guide replied, "The archives." The chart displayed the paths of humanity's earliest deep space probes, tiny lines stretching outward from the Sun. Voyager 1, Voyager 2. Ancient travelers, still moving, still journeying long after the civilization that launched them had changed beyond recognition. The guide touched one of the trajectories. Voyager 1 crossed the Heliopause in 2012, the guide noted. You looked closer and exclaimed, "More than a century ago." Yes, the guide's voice softened, and it is still traveling. The thought felt extraordinary, a machine built by human hands crossing distances so immense that generations passed before its journey reached certain milestones. Some journeys require patience, the guide smiled. Outside, the stars continued shining and the ship glided onward, deeper, farther, quieter. The familiar architecture of planets had largely vanished now, no giant worlds filled the sky, no rings glittered nearby. Only distant sunlight and endless stars remained. The guide stood beside the observation window, saying, "The next stage will feel different." You listened as the guide continued, "The solar system will begin to disappear." The words carried no sadness, only truth. The farther you traveled, the less dominant the sun became and the more apparent the galaxy became. Human perspective would continue widening, home would continue expanding, until eventually, home might include the stars themselves. The guide remained silent for a long while before speaking once more. There is an old recording preserved within the archives of Epoch Echoes. You smiled, another transmission, another voice carried across time. The guide nodded, it was made by a traveler crossing the outer reaches of the Heliosphere. As the stars shimmered beyond the glass, you asked what they said. The guide looked toward the distant sun. The guide quoted, "The farther I traveled from home, there was a pause as the sunlight gleamed faintly against the ship's hull, the larger home became." Silence followed, a peaceful silence. Outside, the heliosphere stretched invisibly around you, an enormous bubble carved into the galaxy by the breath of a single star. Ahead waited its distant shoreline. Beyond that shoreline waited the ocean between stars. And somewhere within that ocean, unseen but steadily approaching, a rhythmic beacon pulsed through the darkness. A lighthouse older than nations, older than history. A heartbeat waiting to be heard. There came a point in every great voyage when landmarks disappeared. Ancient sailors crossing Earth's oceans knew the feeling. The coastline vanished behind them. The destination remained beyond the horizon. Nothing familiar remained in sight. Only water, sky, distance, and trust. The outer solar system carried a similar moment. Perhaps an even deeper one. For many cycles after leaving Saturn behind, the Serenity continued gliding through the immense reaches of the Heliosphere. The sun remained visible. The stars remained visible. Yet something subtle had changed. The solar system no longer felt like a collection of destinations. It felt like a memory stretching behind you. A fading story written in light. The guide noticed it too. One quiet cycle, while both of you stood beneath the observation dome, they asked a simple question. When was the last time you thought about Earth today? You paused. The answer surprised you. Hours ago. Perhaps longer. Not because you had forgotten. Because your attention had expanded. The guide smiled. Exactly. Outside, darkness occupied nearly everything. Not empty darkness. Not lifeless darkness. Living darkness. A darkness filled with structure too subtle to see directly. Invisible magnetic fields. Charged particles. Ancient radiation. Ghostly clouds of gas drifting between stars. The galaxy was not empty. It was simply spacious. The guide raised a hand toward the heavens. Most people imagine stars as isolated. The Milky Way stretched across the dome like a river of crushed diamonds. They're not. You followed their gaze. Between every star existed immense distances. Yet they all shared the same galactic ocean. The same environment. The same cosmic sea. The guide lowered their voice. Welcome to the beginning of interstellar thinking. The phrase settled into your mind. Interstellar. Between stars. Not attached to any single world. Not attached to any single sun. A perspective wider than planets. Wider than solar systems. Wider even than civilizations. For a long moment, neither of you spoke. The observation dome remained dark. The ship's internal lights had automatically dimmed to preserve visibility. The result was breathtaking. Stars surrounded you completely. Not merely above. Everywhere. The illusion of an up direction had long ago disappeared. The galaxy wrapped around the ship like a luminous cocoon. You felt suspended inside infinity itself. The guide eventually activated a display. At first it appeared blank. Then faint wisps emerged. Barely visible. Cloud-like structures drifting through space. What am I looking at? The local interstellar medium. The guide enlarged the image. Thin hydrogen gas. Microscopic dust. Ancient atoms wandering between stars. The material seemed insignificant. Almost non-existent. And yet it stretched across unimaginable distances. The guide smiled. Even the emptiest places contain something. That lesson again. The universe repeatedly challenged assumptions about emptiness. Space between planets wasn't empty. Space between stars wasn't empty. Even darkness contained stories. The guide pointed toward one of the wispy clouds. The atoms inside this region may have originated around completely different stars. You stared. The implication unfolded slowly. Every atom carried history. Some had formed billions of years ago. Some may have passed through multiple solar systems before arriving here. Some may once have belonged to planets, moons, comets, perhaps even life. The guide watched your expression. The galaxy recycles. Outside, the stars shone silently. The atoms in your body were once elsewhere. You looked down at your hands. The familiar thought returned. You were made of stardust. Not metaphorically. Literally. Hydrogen born near the beginning of the universe. Carbon forged within ancient stars. Oxygen created during stellar death. Everything living carried cosmic ancestry. The guide smiled softly. Home is older than Earth. The words lingered. Outside, the Milky Way seemed brighter than ever. Perhaps because your definition of belonging had quietly expanded again. Hours later, the ship entered a region of extraordinary darkness. Not a shadow. Not an eclipse. Simply a direction in space where fewer nearby stars existed. The result was startling. One side of the observation dome blazed with galactic light. The opposite side appeared almost black. A deep abyss stretching toward unknown distances. The guide stood beside you. Many travelers find this view unsettling. You understood why. The darkness felt immense. Bottomless. Ancient. Yet strangely, you no longer feared it. The guide nodded. You've changed. You smiled. So has the universe. The guide laughed softly. No. A pause. You've simply learned how to see it. Outside, the abyss remained motionless. Yet it no longer felt hostile. It felt honest. Not every region of existence needed to be illuminated. Not every mystery required immediate explanation. Some things could remain vast. Unknown. Beautiful. The guide activated another projection. This time it displayed the nearest stars to the sun, tiny points scattered across a large volume. The distances shocked you. Even neighboring stars were separated by trillions of kilometers. The solar system itself suddenly seemed tiny. The guide pointed toward a nearby point of light. Proxima Centauri. Another. Sirius. Another. Altair. Each star possessed its own planets, its own skies, its own possibilities. The guide smiled. The galaxy contains hundreds of billions more. You laughed quietly. Not because it was amusing. Because the scale had become impossible. The mind eventually surrendered. And perhaps that surrender was healthy. The universe was not meant to fit entirely inside human imagination. The guide seemed pleased by the realization. Wisdom begins where certainty ends. The stars continued burning. Far beyond sight. Far beyond travel. Far beyond complete understanding. Yet somehow that made the cosmos feel larger in the best possible way. Not threatening. Inviting. A place where wonder would never run out. Later, during one of the quietest cycles aboard the Serenity, the guide brought you to a rarely used observation chamber near the ship's stern. Unlike the main dome, this room faced backward. Toward home. Toward everything you had left behind. You looked through the glass. And for a moment, you struggled to locate the sun. Eventually you found it. A bright star among countless others. Nothing more. Nothing less. The realization stole your breath. The sun source of every human sunrise. Every growing forest. Every ocean current. Every civilization. Now appeared indistinguishable from distant stars. The guide stood quietly beside you. Neither of you spoke for several minutes. Words would have diminished the moment. Finally, the guide asked, "What do you feel?" You considered carefully. Not sadness. Not loneliness. Not even nostalgia. Something else. Perspective. The guide nodded. Good. Outside, the sun continued shining. Tiny. Brilliant. Distant. One star among billions. The truth felt neither disappointing nor diminishing. It felt liberating. Humanity belonged to something larger than it had imagined. The guide eventually broke the silence. There is an old transmission preserved within the archives of Epoch Echoes. You smiled. The familiar tradition had become part of the journey. The guide looked toward the distant sun. I thought leaving home would make me feel smaller. The stars glowed softly around the ship. A pause followed. Then, instead, I discovered I belonged to a much larger family. The observation chamber fell silent once more. Outside, the ocean between stars stretched endlessly in every direction. A sea without waves. Without shorelines. Without storms. Yet full of hidden currents. Full of memory. Full of possibility. And somewhere ahead, beyond the outer breath of the sun, a precise rhythm continued pulsing through the darkness. Steady. Mathematical. Ancient. Like a lighthouse turning endlessly above a cosmic sea. The first heartbeat of the pulsar was drawing near. The pulse never stopped.
Hours passed.
Perhaps days. Aboard the Serenity, time had become increasingly difficult to measure emotionally. The clocks remained accurate. The ship remained precise. Yet your experience of duration had softened. Moments no longer rushed.
They unfolded.
Like pages turning themselves. Like snow falling through still air. Like starlight crossing unimaginable distances without hurry. And through it all, the pulsar continued speaking. Pulse.
Pause.
Pulse.
Pause. Perfect. Ancient. Patient.
You found yourself returning to the observation dome more often than anywhere else aboard the ship.
Sometimes the guide joined you. Sometimes you sat alone.
Yet even alone, you were never truly alone. The heartbeat remained. A distant companion hidden somewhere beyond the darkness.
A city-sized star turning through eternity.
The observation dome had become darker over recent cycles.
Not because the ship's systems were failing.
Because there was less sunlight to compete with the stars. The sun itself had diminished further.
Still brilliant. Still unmistakable.
Yet increasingly similar to the countless other stars surrounding it.
The universe was quietly teaching the same lesson once again. Perspective. Everything depended on where one stood. You sat beneath the transparent ceiling.
The pulse echoed softly through the chamber.
Not loud enough to dominate attention. Only enough to accompany it. The guide entered silently carrying 2 cups of tea. The familiar ritual. One of the few unchanged things remaining from Earth.
You accepted yours. The warmth settled into your hands. Outside, the temperature of space remained only a few degrees above absolute zero. Inside, tea steamed gently.
The contrast felt meaningful. The guide sat beside you. Neither of you spoke immediately.
The pulse filled the silence.
Pulse. Pause. Pulse. Pause.
Eventually the guide smiled.
Do you notice it? You listened. The rhythm? The guide nodded. Something else. You waited.
The guide leaned back slightly.
Your breathing. Only then did you become aware of it.
Without realizing it, your breaths had gradually synchronized with the pulse.
Not perfectly. Not mechanically. Naturally. Like 2 pendulums slowly finding harmony. The guide seemed unsurprised. Life seeks rhythm. Outside, stars filled every direction. The pulse continued. A cosmic metronome guiding nothing. Demanding nothing. Simply existing.
The guide folded their hands. Every living system depends upon repetition.
You listened. Breathing. Heartbeat. Sleep. Wakefulness. The guide smiled. The universe appears surprisingly fond of cycles.
The thought felt comforting.
Not because repetition eliminated mystery. Because it provided stability within mystery.
The stars remained unpredictable. The future remained unknown.
Yet certain rhythms endured. A planet completed in orbit. A heart completed a beat. A pulsar completed a rotation. Again. And again. And again. The guide activated a projection. A translucent image appeared above the observation floor. At first it resembled a simple wave. Then additional waves emerged. Some represented breathing. Others represented heartbeats. Others represented the pulsar. The patterns flowed together. Interweaving. Crossing. Separating. Returning. The guide pointed. Different scales. The waves continued dancing. Same language. The realization unfolded slowly. Life communicated through rhythm. Nature communicated through rhythm. Even stars communicated through rhythm. The universe seemed less like a machine now. More like music. The guide noticed your expression. Exactly. A smile appeared. Mathematics and music have always been close relatives. Outside, darkness stretched endlessly beyond the ship. The pulse remained steady. You closed your eyes. For several minutes, you simply listened. No goals. No analysis. No effort. Only awareness. The heartbeat of a dead star. The quiet breathing of your own lungs. The faint vibration of the ship. The silence between sounds. Eventually, something unexpected happened. The pulse seemed slower. Not because it had changed. Because your perception had. The guide spoke softly. Meditation often feels like slowing down. The pulse continued. It isn't. You opened your eyes. The guide smiled. It is noticing more. Outside, the stars appeared sharper somehow. More present. The darkness richer. The silence deeper. Nothing had changed. Except attention. The guide nodded toward the observation glass. For most of human history, people looked at the night sky. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens. They saw beauty. A pause. They saw mythology. Another pause. They saw mystery. The guide smiled. All of those were correct. The stars continued shining. Astronomy had not removed wonder. It had expanded it. Knowing what pulsars were did not diminish their beauty. Knowing how stars formed did not diminish their brilliance. Understanding often deepened awe rather than replacing it. The guide stood and walked toward the window. You followed. Together you watched the galaxy drift beyond the hull. The pulse remained. Steady. 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 The guide pointed toward the distant sun, barely brighter than the surrounding stars now. Do you know what Voyager 1 discovered near the edge of the heliosphere? You shook your head. The guide smiled. Silence. The answer surprised you. What kind of silence? The guide looked thoughtful. The kind that appears when one ocean ends and another begins. The words lingered. Ahead waited the heliopause. The frontier where the influence of the sun weakened. The boundary where interstellar space truly began. Not a wall. Not a gate. A conversation. A balance. A shoreline between two cosmic seas. Outside, the stars seemed almost impossibly numerous. The farther the Serenity traveled, the more the galaxy revealed itself. Humanity's home star became less central. The universe became larger. And yet strangely, you felt more connected rather than less. The guide's voice became quieter. Many travelers expect the outer solar system to feel lonely. You considered that. It didn't. Not anymore. The guide nodded. Loneliness often comes from disconnection. The pulse continued. But everything here is connected. The stars. The dust between stars. The atoms within your body. The sunlight crossing the ship. The pulsar spinning in darkness. Everything belonged to the same story. The same universe. The same unfolding process that had begun billions of years ago. The guide smiled softly. And stories rarely end where we expect. Hours later, after the guide had departed, you remained alone beneath the observation dome. The pulse continued. The stars continued. The darkness continued. And for the first time since leaving Earth, you felt no urge to arrive anywhere. No urgency. No impatience. No need to reach the next destination. The journey itself had become enough. You sat quietly. Listening. Breathing. Watching. The pulse seemed almost indistinguishable from your own heartbeat now. Not because they matched. Because both belonged to a larger rhythm. A larger pattern. A larger whole. Somewhere ahead lay the Heliopause. The final shoreline of the sun. The threshold between home and the greater galaxy. Beyond it waited the deepest silence of the voyage. The deepest stillness. The deepest lesson. And as the Serenity drifted onward through the ocean between stars, the lighthouse continued turning in the darkness. Its ancient beams swept across the void. Its heartbeat crossed the ages. And every pulse seemed to whisper the same gentle truth: you are smaller than you imagined. And more connected than you ever believed.